It is 10 o'clock. Good morning. I'm Lucas Panzica from the 104.5 The Zone Studios. College baseball. Tennessee is one game away from the College World Series finals after a 4-run comeback capped by a walk-off win over Florida State on Friday, followed by a 6-1 win over UNC on Sunday. The Vols will play again Wednesday, awaiting the winner between UNC and FSU. College World Series action starts today at 1. Florida taking on NC State in an elimination game. Texas A&M takes on Kentucky at 6 p.m. Bryson DeChambeau is now a 2-time U.S. Open champion after holding off Rory McIlroy to win at 6 under at Pinehurst on Sunday. And in NFL news, Bengals wide receiver T. Higgins has signed his franchise tender after missing the offseason program. Higgins will earn $21.8 million this season under the tag. For all your foundation repairs and waterproofing needs, visit USSTN.com. Breaking news at once on your home for the Titans and Vols. This is 104.5 The Zone.
Can you not do that so loud in my ear? Today is an interesting day because it was an incredible weekend, and the lows that are resulting from the highest of highs, the celebration of the sleighs in Long Beach, California. Bert is holding himself in studio, damn near in the fetal position. The gang is back together. Morale is somewhere in between. Excited to be back and just dreadful for the energy that it took to get ourselves to the studio today. It sounds like Bert had a harder time than me. Good morning, boys.
Speak for yourself. Morale is high. Maybe not in your corner of the room over there, but
today.
Jackson and I are very chipper this morning.
Lovely.
You don't seem to be.
Well, I was chipper all weekend long. It was a beautiful celebration. I am very sorry that the two of you had to miss it. Bert damn near tried to miss it. Do you want to explain to yourself your logistical issues?
No. I don't want to explain anything. I wish Long Beach was like Vegas, where whatever happened there just stayed there and we didn't have to talk about it. But
what did you do for your first segment this morning? You didn't talk about the wedding?
No. Not at all.
Did you really not?
How was it? It was fantastic. Congratulations to the Sleighs. Moving on.
Are you scared?
No, I'm not scared. Listen, I'm going to be honest with you guys. I think there's one thing that you can always trust, at least two things. One, that I'm not going to smell great. Two, that I'm going to be transparent. I am having a rough go of it. I am not having the easiest transition from that life to this life. So I guess instead of talking about what I did and the copious amounts of things I drank at the wedding, I will talk about the trips there and back again, a Burt Baggins story. Because the trip over there was rough. I'll make this one quick. So I got on the plane. They were about to take off, and they I guess this is, if I was a pilot, this is what I imagine happened. The check engine light's on. Oh, we got to take it into get a lube check or something. So they pull over. They're like, oh yeah, the engineers are going to check it out. 2 hours later, they're like, everybody get your fat asses off of the plane. We're going to find another plane for you guys. The only problem was supposed to take off at 11:15. Sat on the tarmac for a good hour and a half. My connection was in Atlanta at 1. When an hour forward in time. So I was going to miss my connection in Atlanta, not get to California until who knows what time.
Texted me just as depressed. I could feel the tone through the phone because he had, it's not insignificant to just do a weekend trip to California. Like, there's a lot of logistics that go into it. There's a lot of different things. And when I landed in LA at about 10 a.m. Pacific time to a text from Bert that just said, I'm deboarding my plane.
Buck called me, and I had a moment of happiness at your misery because I said, yes, maybe he won't make it, and he can stay back and hang out with me this weekend.
Do you think that would have made me feel any better? But I will say, I don't believe any of the bad things either one of you say about Dawn Davenport, because as I was walking through the airport, who do I hear his voice? What the hell are you doing, Bert? I turn around and it's Dawn and her fantastic husband, Travis. And she's like, you should try to get on my plane. No big deal. Try to get on the plane with us. I was like, that is a fantastic idea, Dawn, because the desk that I had asked for help told me you need to go back out through security and find a help desk on the other side.
They said, get out of the airport.
Dude, they were, I'll throw them under the bus. Delta was not trying to help me. The airport was not trying to help me. No one was trying to help me. And then,
Lucas wasn't even trying to help you. He was just trying to get the last segment out of it.
it was Dawn. Dawn, who's the one who helped me. She took me over and she was like, is there any way you guys have a flight? Like my friend, his flight got displaced. And she said, yes, I have one ticket. I said, run it.
No.
Run it. Because before.
Oh, you paid for it?
Yeah. What did you think I would? Did you think I was going to perform a song and dance? Like, hello, my baby. Hello, my darling. Let me on the plane right now.
It's my party. So did you get your refund on the first flight?
Yeah. Working through that right now. They don't want to give it to me, but you're going to because I had trip protection. So you're not going to get me there, Delta. So I get on the plane with them, last flight, but Ramon and our incredible airline stewardess who was in charge of the whole brigade over there.
The goon squad that rolled into the hotel.
That's right.
Just
look, I've been hanging out with Buck all weekend, so I do his mannerisms now. That's right.
Well, listen,
yes.
The two of you, it's seeping through. It's osmosis because he's taking enjoyment at your pain and suffering, and you're taking on catchphrases. So
and you're not
distance
using
yourself a
deodorant
little
this
bit.
morning. I can smell.
Oh, it's symbiotic.
It's cyclical.
Back and forth.
It's cyclical.
Well, the problem is I still smell like the cigarettes that you had me smoke.
Yes. Oh, that was. I forgot about. There's so many things I forgot about. But being outside of this wedding,
ripping darts,
and me, I'm smoking a cigarette, and then I just feel this ever so slight tap on my shoulder, and it's Buck with his hand out.
Give me one.
Yeah. Smoke them if you got them.
When's the last time you smoked a cigarette?
I mean, it's gotta be college, but
it was awesome. That was a great part. I don't even remember where the hell I was at the story.
No, you were just you told us that you were going to make this short, and then you immediately went into this huge diatribe about all your drama. The MVP of the week. We'll just do it this way. We'll keep it clean for the kids at home. The MVP of the weekend was Dawn. Dawn
Easily.
Was excellent. Excellent. I know we put it to a poll at Buck Rising is where you can vote on them. Which of us on air here at 104.5 would be the best wedding guest? I don't know if Dawn is winning in the submissions. I don't know where she is in the voting. She would be my pick because not only did she get Bert a flight out there, she basically took over control of the wedding logistics once things. There were some issues with the kitchen situation. It was an excellent wedding, and everything that Krista and Slay put together was awesome. But there was just some logistical issues around dinner. All of a sudden, I see Dawn bussing tables. Dawn is out here bringing people food to their tables at this wedding, and Travis, who, by the way, this is the first time that I've spent any time around Dawn's husband.
Which is a shame. He's incredible.
Rock star.
Yeah.
We had so much fun, the two of them together. Also, the only bad thing that I will say about Dawn Davenport that is absolutely true, and you cannot dispute this, I've never seen a woman have that lack of rhythm in my life on a dance floor.
Oh, no.
Dawn.
Have you ever
but
seen...
no shame. None whatsoever.
You ever seen Seinfeld, Elaine dancing? It's just like...
Yes.
I mean, it was... But because God loves Slay's sister Christina, because she came around to us all at various points and asked us all if this was our first black wedding. And for a lot of us, it was like, yeah, we're along for the ride, we're having a good time, and like Dawn out there on the dance floor, because the music that is being played is, a little different from a lot of the Catholic weddings that I've gone to in my life or whatever. And Dawn in the middle of all that, just getting down in the ugliest way fashion, is one of the highlights of my life. Dawn, I love you for that. Among many other things this weekend, it was an excellent trip. I don't feel like I've been on a lot of weddings with my family, just because not a lot of people have gotten married in our like immediate family or extended family circle, but like that was what this weekend felt like. It felt like a family vacation out to Long Beach, just the most ridiculous thing from top to bottom. And again, to Bert's credit, we will not divulge all the details because some things should in fact stay in Long Beach.
My favorite thing was Dawn acting like there were submissions for songs that could be played. Play some Nelly!
Yeah.
Play some Nelly!
Was it a band or a DJ?
It was a DJ.
And he was it
DJ
kinda,
C-Wiz from the bridge building party before Titans game.
It kind of switched around because at one point we had a violinist who was like doing instrumentals from. Yeah, I almost forgot about that part too. There are so many foggy, hazy moments.
And you guys went on a little aquarium excursion yesterday?
Dude, listen, he is never a big proponent of Bert having good ideas, but he came around. The aquarium was incredible.
The way that Ramon looked at us when we said we were going to the aquarium at 9 a.m. on a Saturday morning in Long Beach, California. It was the aquarium. The aquarium made me sad. Robert thought that we were not going to be able to get into the aquarium. So I started taking pictures like he's Pablo Escobar in Narcos, those sad images, those screenshots of him sitting alone. We had one of him in front of a lighthouse just staring off in the distance because he made this big deal about the damn aquarium of the Pacific and then forgot to get everybody reservations because everybody in God's green earth is going to the aquarium of Pacific.
But you didn't need reservations
on a Saturday morning. We got in.
Don't spoil the story.
Got in. The point...
Oh, was that the big climactic moment?
No,
was that
was not
just
the big
walked
climactic moment. The big climactic moment was how sad Bert was to see that they just put an aquarium in a strip mall. Like it's next to a Nike outlet store and a Hooters.
I know.
Okay? There's a Bubba Gump shrimp that I'm convinced that they're taking.
They get the shrimp from the aquarium.
Can you give me the reckless speculation sound, please? I need... Just quickly, because I'm convinced, and again, reckless speculation, so I cannot be held accountable for this. I'm convinced that the Aquarium of the Pacific is just shipping all the dead fish parts over to the Bubba Gump shrimp, and that is what tourists are dining on when they go visit Long Beach.
It is their retirement. That's what they do. They get to go over. They get to cross that rainbow bridge.
That's what they do with the lobsters. They put them in the tank at Bubba Gump.
Bring in the dancing lobsters. The aquarium was great. Buck is going to make it sound like it was a pay for prison for fish. It was not. The great insight into the Pacific, which is the ocean that I am not accustomed to. I'm accustomed to the Atlantic, the Great East Ocean. But we went to the Pacific.
The Great East Ocean?
Let me come up with
That's
names.
what they say.
Let me come. I've always said, hey, what do you call that? Great East Ocean. A lot of fish.
You are so lucky one of those lorikeets didn't poop on me in that exhibit.
I wish they would have bit
imagine?
you. He wouldn't. All it was $4, Lucas. $4 for a cup of sugar water to feed birds. Buck said, why would you want birds? Birds are beautiful colored birds adorning people from shoulder to wrist. Just tons of birds.
The thing said, as soon as we walked in, the lorikeets will bite. Don't touch them. What am I going to do if this thing lands on me? I'm going to scream in terror, and then I'm going to push it away the way that I did that damn jellyfish when you made me do the touch tank.
Okay, so I made Buck do a touch tank because, of course, the guy who eats French fries with his hands is going to be...
Not this weekend, baby. I was at Roscoe's Chicken and Waffles eating French fries with my hands. It was wild.
You were also trashed. The touch tank that we use, you would think you would delicately, it says 2 fingers. You would lightly touch something to feel something you've never felt before. Buck goes in and just slams it. This jellyfish is just blown asunder. Just CTE for the brainless floating blob. It just spins out of control.
I really did give that thing a concussion. I was
got dazed.
The guy was like, sir, touch tank, touch, not punch. It's not a punch tank, touch tank.
I was not prepared for the depth of the touch tank. I just kind of jabbed this thing in the dome.
I'm surprised you were willing to put your hand in there and touch any of the fish.
Listen,
you should have seen the friction that was caused of him
furiously washing his hands.
That would make a better sound. But
what's better than you sticking your fingers in your mouth after you're swirling them around in the manna or the stingray tank?
I needed to see if it was fresh or salt water. They wouldn't answer my questions.
So that was our trip.
Sounds like a time was had.
Something like that. Time was borrowed.
All right, go to sleep. You look terrible.
Congratulations, Slay!
Are we bringing Charles Davis into this foolishness?
I guess. I don't know how we're going to make this more professional, but one way we're going to try is with Charles Davis of CBS Sports and the Titans preseason broadcast. Charles and Paul Burmeister were at practices throughout the course of the offseason program, and we'll get some insights from him coming up next. Welcome back to the show. We are fueled by Hattie B's Hot Chicken. Let's try and class up this act a little bit. Unprofessional is the start of the show, so we need a dose of professionalism. We are lucky to have Charles Davis of CBS Sports, the NFL on CBS. You can also catch him on the Titans preseason broadcast, which we always look forward to in just a few months from now. Good morning, Charles. Thanks for stopping by.
Good morning. Thanks for having me. If you're trying to jump things up, class it up a little bit, you got to search a little bit farther, man.
Well, Charles, you have to understand how low the bar for class in this show is. So just anybody with a shred of dignity around here makes us look better as a product. So we appreciate you for that.
Well, I appreciate that. We probably should bring in another person then to do that because I'm going to probably ride with you.
That's fine. We'll take you. That's a hell of a teammate to have. Charles Davis here with us on 104.5 The Zone. So you got the opportunity to spend some time at practices in the last couple of weeks, Charles. What did you go in specifically looking for ahead of your preseason broadcast preparation?
Mainly, Buck, the thing I was going in there looking for, and it's just trying to, one, learn the roster. Now, obviously, there is some carryover, even though NFL football is way different than than it was when we were growing up, right? With free agency and roster turnover and how things go. We never had that to this extent that we have year in, year out now in the NFL. So you're just trying to do that, see who the new people are. Obviously, you know who they are, but you want to see them at work. But in this case now, it's a brand new coaching staff, head coach all the way down, brand new way of quote unquote doing things. Although, as we all know, football is football, but how the message gets transmitted, what the key things are that this staff wants that maybe the other staff didn't, or just different in how they do it. And it always comes down to when you have something new like this, when you have Brian Callahan in charge instead of Mike Vrabel, everyone's looking for, well, how is it different? What's the comparison? What is this? What is that? Bottom line is the Brian Callahan that I knew in Cincinnati and have known from before is that's the Brian Callahan I saw in early display there. He's not worried about comparisons. He's not worried about how it was quote unquote done before, other than just having historical knowledge. They want to do it their way, coach it their way, transmit it their way. And they're not saying right, wrong, or anything else. This is just how we plan to do it. And that's kind of refreshing for me.
And looking at the way that, you talk about not being the NFL that you grew up with necessarily or were a part of throughout the course of your career and how much different that is, that level of partnership almost that starts with the head coach and is related down to the players. How conducive do you think that dynamic is to a good working environment? Because football just seems like it's wired so, to its core with this hard-nosed kind of attitude, approach, line in the sand, do or die type of stuff. And to see somebody come in that's a little more, just a little more fluid, I guess is the word that I'll use, Charles, is definitely something refreshing, certainly seems to be for the players to an extent based on our conversations with them in the last month and a half or so.
Yeah, and that's part of what happens all the time when things change. People move on, you bring a new person in. Oftentimes when you hire someone to replace, the differences get exemplified if they're differences that you're looking to add to your place. So, Mike Vrabel did it one way. Brian Callahan's going to do it another. The team feels pretty good about what they're seeing so far out of Brian Callahan and how it's being done in comparison to what Mike Vrabel did before. But it's not, as you and I both know, it's not as black and white as that, oh, wow, I love it better this way than I did the other. The other way was appreciated in a lot of ways as well, but you weren't winning enough games down the stretch. So now here comes a new person, different message. Hey, maybe I can talk to this person different than I talk to the other person. That feels good, especially in the beginning. Now, will it hold up over time? That's the key for everyone, Brian Callahan and his staff can only do it the way that they can do it because that's who they are and that's how it goes down. But that seems to be exactly what Tennessee was looking for as a replacement for Mike Vrabel. But I think we can make that case almost everywhere, right, Buck? When you watch who was in charge before, if it wasn't going well, you could almost pretty much predict the next person in charge will be, I'm not going to say polar opposite, but there will be some differences that that they're looking for. Pick your sport, pick your teams, pick your coaching staff. We've all said it. Once one person goes out, almost every time you hire the opposite, that goes, you hire the opposite again, and it's almost a pendulum that swings back and forth. But that's just me and my old age kicking in a little bit. But I do think that there's some element of truth to that.
Charles Davis of the NFL on CBS is here with us on 104.5 The Zone. We're talking a little Titans this morning.
And Brian Callahan, Charles, has talked over and over again about the strategy of putting quarterbacks in comfortable situations, playing to their strengths, gaining feedback from those players. What works for them? What do they like? So with that in mind, what are you most looking forward to seeing Brian Callahan lean into when it comes to Will Levis's strengths in terms of what Callahan might be able to tap into this season?
Yeah, I think, if that's the way it's going to go down, which I think is a smart way of doing it, letting them have a little bit of, I hate the word ownership, but you're in it with us, and you're exactly right about Brian Callahan wanting to play to the strengths of that quarterback. And that's the thing we always have to keep in mind. You've got to know what those strengths are in order to play into them. And he's going to learn them, and he's learning them already. And it won't be that hard to do. But the things you're asking me that I think he's going to lean into, Will Levis likes to throw the ball downfield. This wide receiver core has the ability to get downfield, and especially when you throw in the tight end. All right. That doesn't mean that every time they throw the football, it's going to be a 30-yard pass downfield. That's not what I'm saying. But the idea that you've got a big, strong-arm quarterback who likes to chuck it down there, you've got some receivers now who can go get it, they will be designing things up, scheming things up in order to exemplify that. That's when those guys get comfortable. Think about it this way. Every game that you hear us yackers talk about, right? We always talk about getting a quarterback comfortable early, the offense coordinator, give him some plays that he's comfortable with, and, get him some completions early, get his confidence up, especially if he struggled before, et cetera, et cetera. That almost always translates into what, guys? Swing passes, short check downs, 5-yard outs. You know what I'm talking about, right? But if you know your quarterback really well, sometimes their comfort zone might be something different. Mason Rudolph, the backup quarterback now in Tennessee, who I think will be the number 2 guy. I know he's in competition with Malik Willis. You know what his comfort zone is? From my years of watching Mason Rudolph? Deep fades and post routes. You want to get Mason Rudolph comfortable? Those throws he loves to make. Okay? So does that mean you call those automatically? Yeah, depends on situation. But you want him comfortable? Brian Callahan, he's going to call the ones that are comfortable for that quarterback. And I think with Levis, ultimately, it's being able to make some of those dagger throws downfield, because that's when he feels he's at his best.
So speaking of that competition, obviously you and Paul Burmeister will be keeping up with a lot of position battles throughout the course of the preseason, calling these games on TV. Is there any that comes to mind in terms of the top of the list, the most intriguing positional battles to watch with this team, whether it's the one with the most candidates, whatever comes to mind for you after taking in a few practices from the offseason program?
Yeah, I do think offensive line is going to be the fun one to watch. You've got one of the best coaches in the history of the NFL, and that's not hyperbole, and Bill Callahan. You guys have seen the sleds, right? The ones that Coach Callahan designed and marketed and patented and the whole thing. I mean, this man thinks offensive line, understands it as well as anyone out there. I do realize the guy in Philadelphia gets a lot of attention, and deservedly so. Let's not forget one of the all-time masters, and he works in Tennessee now. That offensive line is going to get a ton of it, because I think right now you'd say Cushenberry at center, Skoronski at left guard, and Latham at left tackle, barring injuries, is pretty well a lockdown deal, right?
Yeah.
Right guard, right tackle is going to be fun for the Titan fans to watch, because I don't think anything's locked down there. I don't want anybody to take, what they saw in OTAs and mini camps as the gospel, because some guys weren't full participants, et cetera, et cetera. But they're going to have to earn their spots. And they're going to want to get to it as quickly as possible to get an offensive line solidified. Because, guys, and anyone listening to our voices, if there's one spot that needs that continuity, take quarterback out of it, that you've got to have a working continuity where they know every move, everything you're going to do, and it's real simple, right? Where it gets boiled down, it's offensive line. I mean, those offensive linemen, the way that they move, the way that they react, the way that they have to work in concert and tandem. If one guy goes one way, the other guy's got to know what the move is on the other side. It is offensive line. And that's why you're trying your best to get your 5 and keep them together, snap in and snap out, down in and down out. I mean, I can go chapter and verse on stories about offensive lines and the great ones in the past and how they just, didn't even have to speak to each other. They knew all the best moves, but those are the ones that stay together 2, 3, 4, 5 years together. Tennessee's trying to put one together that learns that in the beginning and hopefully can play to that standard that they can keep them together for a while.
There was definitely a compounding of issues because not only was, the offensive line insufficient here for the past couple of years, but the lineup kept changing, to your point, and that made things so much more difficult on the offensive unit, just trying to find some level of rhythm and continuity. Charles Davis here with us on 104.5 The Zone. We're talking a little bit of Titans. You can, of course, catch Charles and Paul Burmeister and Corey Curtis on the Titans preseason network broadcasts that are coming up in just a few weeks from now once we get training camp underway. The preseason games will start. 3 really fun games with a joint practice against the Seattle Seahawks here in town before that game at Nissan Stadium. To your point about the quarterbacks, Charles, just going back to Levis in particular, tough to evaluate him in a situation like his last year, but you take the sample size that you have. Where did you see him struggle the most with his comfort level? Muddy pockets, a pretty consistent theme for him, and any quarterback has to be adept at it. But beyond that and the pressure, the issues that those cause, what were you kind of looking to see him clean up year over year?
I just think, the word consistency can be overused because it feels like a great fallback word, but he's got to be able to develop that. And that only takes time and snaps. And I think that you articulate it very well. It's a small sample size right now. Sometimes I wondered to myself as I watched them progress down the stretch last year, that opener, that first game versus Atlanta maybe wasn't the greatest thing in the world for him. Because sometimes it feels like, we're crushing this bad boy. Now, I'm not saying that Will Levis walked away from the game going, boy, I've got this NFL down pat. But it does set you to your confidence level rises. It feels pretty good. And then next game is like, whoa, I didn't see that last time. Because that's what the NFL does. They see what you did before. They try and throw something at you haven't dealt with, see if you can pick it up and go. I do think the Miami game that we all point to, and rightly so, the numbers weren't tremendous, but the leadership was, the competitive spirit was, all that you're looking for from that quarterback. And let's not forget, he came out for the draft last year. There was an injury there. Played through a senior at Kentucky like that. Then you get into camp. He hurts an ankle. He can't get the snaps. Malik Willis takes almost every snap in preseason. So he's behind trying to catch up. And you guys know as well as anyone, trying to catch up when the season starts is very difficult to do because you can't get the reps involved. It's hard to do. This year, he'll be taking those reps. He'll be taking those reps and then some. How they do it in preseason for games, I don't know what Brian Callahan has planned yet. We'll see how that goes. But I do, as you said, I do like the preseason schedule. Quarterback aside, 3 NFC teams. And I think that's a good thing in a lot of ways. Because sometimes, conferences develop a style, develop how they do it. And now you're coming in. New Orleans is the last game. Obviously, the second game is Seattle, and you mentioned the joint practices. And the opener is, hit me again.
San Fran.
You know what's interesting about them? 2 of the 3 are led by defensive coaches. Dennis Allen, Mike McDonald, a rookie coach in Seattle, which means, as a general rule, hard-nosed, tough guys that you're going to play against, get after you as hard as they can, and coaches who want their offenses to run the football because that's what defense coaches typically like. Now, again, it's not 100%. Flip it over to the other side, you get Kyle Shanahan, and you got everything coming at you. Now, obviously, it's preseason. Who's going to run the team? You're not likely to see Purdy and McCaffrey and all them, but all the guys who are going to try and make the team, you get that myriad of things coming at you from Kyle Shanahan. So your defensive side of the ball, Denard Wilson's crew, that gets a heck of a look in that first game. So it's going to be fun to watch. I'm excited about it. Will Levis, yes, he will be the focus. But overall with this team, and I think that they're a team that they remind me a little bit of Tampa right now for this reason. General manager at Tampa has said on record, Everybody keeps telling us we're not all that good, and we just won the division last 2 years. And again, you're picking someone else for this year. Fine, we'll just keep operating this way. Tennessee's not quite in the same spot because they won the division the last 2 years. But on paper and what we've seen early, one person's opinion, mine, it's a better roster than what they're probably getting credit for nationally. And if they can get off to a good start, they could be lying in wait for some people in a really, really volatile division.
Well, the volatility of the division is going to be as fun a thing as we've had around here in a while, Charles, just because the Texans, will go in with a favorite, and they should justifiably be so for what they were able to accomplish with C.J. Stroud having such a spectacular rookie year. But Trevor Lawrence on the heels of this contract, Anthony Richardson, a giant question mark. Will Levis, definitely a question mark to an extent, but all four teams very, very competitive right now. Coming out of a season where three of the four were highly competitive and basically in the hunt graphic until the very end. In the case of Indianapolis, with Lawrence though, there was never any other decision in your mind. I would imagine, unless you're going to correct me here, that Trevor Lawrence was going to be the guy in Jacksonville. Yes.
No, I agree with that totally. Here's the interesting part. I actually last week spent some time with a former GM in the league who had success as a GM in the league, okay? And he said the biggest conundrum you're going to have as a GM, you're going to have a million things thrown at you. But when you have a quarterback like Trevor Lawrence, okay, and you have that quarterback up and the money's, you've got to pay the money, it looks like, et cetera. But what if you know in your heart he's really not the guy? Can you have the backing of your administration? Can you have the chutzpah to hold in there and go, yeah, we're not going to sign him? And everyone loses their mind because there aren't many, right? There aren't many. And he's like, and note he said his thing was, can he get me to the Super Bowl and win the Super Bowl? He said that really should be the ultimate question. The problem is because there aren't many of those guys who are locked down, yes, they can win the Super Bowl. They're going to make this money because that quarterback you're about to sign is better than a lot of the other quarterbacks. And now you're hoping to make it up somewhere else. And he said, here's the kicker. Okay, we're going to sign him. We'll get better in other places and that'll make him better and we'll be okay somehow. But I just signed him for all this money, so I don't have money to sign those other people. So it's one of those deals. But to your point, because of that, you're going to tell me you're not going to sign the guy that you drafted number one, who has shown the flashes. Consistency went out the window a little bit last year, I think in a large part due to injuries. But guess what? I'm going to say no, and then who am I going to acquire? So a lot of these contracts get done based on that, and the quarterbacks are benefiting from it.
He is Charles Davis. He is, as expected, infinitely more professional than this radio show has been at the start of the morning. And
a breath of fresh air.
His analysis as a result. You can catch him on the Titans preseason broadcast. The preseason for Tennessee begins at home August the 10th against the San Francisco 49ers. WKRN News 2 is where you can watch them here in Nashville. And, of course, you can hear Charles and watch Charles throughout the course of the season on the NFL on CBS. Thank you so much for your time, my friend. It's always good to chat with you.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys. Please tell everyone hello for me back there and look forward to getting back there for the preseason and hopefully some during the regular season. And I'm as excited about Brian Callahan and staff being there as everyone else is who's a Titans fan. He's earned this opportunity. I think he's going to do quite well in it. Take care.
That's the main man. Nailed the dismount. Charles Davis with us on 104.5 The Zone. So, speaking of things that have impressed, let's talk about some undrafted rookie free agents that have stood out throughout the course of the last month and a half, one in particular from the University of Tennessee. I'm Buck Rising. It's 104.5 The Zone. Welcome back to the show. We are fueled by Hattie B's Hot Chicken. Jackson and Lucas currently fueled by just mouths full of cookies that they've been shoveling in their faces during the commercial breaks. Good to see that nothing changed in my absence. UDFAs that have impressed in the last month since the Titans made their signings official. After the draft process, it's always very competitive. They always leave a couple of people downstairs in the draft room to continue to work the phones immediately after the draft concludes, while the general manager comes up and meets with the media because they have to get in what is basically a bidding war with a lot of these players. And there are some people that can make a difference in a couple of different spots, especially on a roster is in flux. Less in flux, though. There's really not a lot of flux left to give. They've signed a lot of at least starting caliber players, but in a couple of spots, there is some competition and some names to keep an eye on. Now, they've already cut one of the players that I was kind of interested in, and forgive me if I butcher his name, Xavier Gadlin? Xavier Gadlin?
Oh, the lack of confidence. Yes.
I'm terrified.
It's a tough one.
No,
it's
more
a tough one.
confident about that?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not.
I charged into the breach there. You feel free.
Absolutely not. No, but there is
offensive lineman that they signed. The nation's, I think the Athletic had him ranked as the 27th best guard prospect. NFL.com had him at 22nd. 24 years old. He was at Tulsa for 6 years. He was a player that did have some snaps at right tackle and right guard, which is why I was kind of curious, but they did waive him over the weekend with an injury designation. So one of the guys that I was interested in is already out.
So who, going into the offseason program, when we get the comprehensive list of UDFAs, who are the three names you were most intrigued by? Before we get into who's kind of flashed after minicamp and OTAs, like three names that immediately you put at the forefront in terms of UDFAs that could potentially make a run at this roster.
The Temple tight end, David Martin Robinson, who had a couple of really nice highlights that I saw throughout the course of the draft process. Didn't really watch him a ton until after we saw his name out there. Cole Spencer, who was a guard at Texas Tech, who I thought was interesting. And then, between I'll just say both of the Tennessee players for local ties, obviously Jabari Small and Gabe Judy Lawley, just because, if anything happens there, it's worth talking about when a guy who's especially been at Tennessee and Vanderbilt, in the case of Judy Lawley, makes any kind of an impact the way that he clearly has, because there's been reps to go around for him.
I see what you're saying from a local angle, but Dylan Johnson, a more premier player at the college level than Jabari Small, much more productive player.
No, you've been on him from the jump.
So I think those would be the three. The tight end you mentioned, Cole Spencer. And then for me, Dylan Johnson at the top, but that's obviously not including the local ties. I'm not going to lie to you, though. Gabe Judy Lawley was not even somebody I considered as...
Didn't expect anything?
Yeah, someone that would make a run at anything, just given what they've done in the cornerback room. And he still may not be on this roster, right? Because he flashed at OTAs. It's still going to be a long shot, right? For Gabe Judy Lawley to make the 53?
No, for sure. I mean, he's competing now for a spot with Trey Avery and Caleb Farley, if you're going to look at him that high up, even that high up in the pecking order, because they do have some defensive backs who have some NFL experience about them. And, he's certainly not the biggest player, but he's done something with the opportunity that he's gotten, for example, because L'Jarius Sneed is not out there during practice. I mean, he's out there for the walkthrough portions, but he's not taking part in the 7-on-7 reps, so there's some reps to go around.
And you got to include Eric Garror on the back end of that cornerback competition, who has some experience, who has some potentially special teams value, is factoring into the punt return competition. So it is stacked ahead of Gabe Judy Lawley. But, I mean, no other UDFA was talked about even remotely close to how much Gabe Judy Lawley's name came up through the last few weeks.
Again, I think that's a product of he's out there to play. Like, the running backs have been out there, so we're not really talking about Jabari Small that way, other than he caught a touchdown pass, I want to say from Malik Willis at some point in mandatory minicamp. But beyond that, like, the starters have been here. They've had good attendance, and they had perfect attendance for mandatory minicamp. So, beyond some depth guys on the defensive line, for the most part, these position groups are pretty top heavy.
And it's 7-on-7 where receivers and DBs are going to get the most chances to flash. Like, are we going to come away saying, man, tell you what, Cole Spencer today, pretty good. pretty good with no pads on.
Yeah, well, the thing that you would have to do to be able to have that kind of conversation is have at least a base level knowledge of what Bill Callahan is trying to accomplish based on the individual drills that they're doing at any given point in the offensive line room, and then assessing. Basically, you have to be taking tape of the drills and going back and reviewing what the offensive lineman was doing in the drill to be able to have any kind of concept of whether or not they're succeeding the way that they need them to succeed right now before the pads come on, right? So you have to have a more intricate level of offensive line knowledge than I would assume most of us have. So, yeah, he's worth paying attention to, but am I going to make any grand assessments about him, any indictments or otherwise about him based on the spring and summer? No, not really. We'll have to wait until training camp gets out there, but or gets going. But I think, for him, for Gabe Jeudy-Lally in particular, there's some things to like about it, and that's clearly caught the attention of Denard Wilson, the defensive coordinator, who was asked about this a couple of days ago at some point last week. Or I guess, at some point last week the coordinators met with them after mandatory minicamp. So it's been a little while since we've spoken to Denard. Either way, defensive coordinator on Gabe Jeudy-Lally.
He's done an outstanding job. Like, he's taking advantage of his reps. You'll see him out in 7-on-7. He's competing. He's doing a great job. And when plays are there for him to make, he's there and he's making them. The ball found energy, and he brings energy every day.
So I talked to him a little bit. That was Tuesday because he was one of the players that was made available, one of the, we'll call them closer to fringe players, roster players that we've talked to date. And, he's talking about it's been a ride, being a little kid. You want to be in the situation, just thankful for the opportunities, trying to make the most of every single chance. I don't want to, it's just the standard line for a guy who's trying to capitalize on the opportunity, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with him having the same mindset. That's the appropriate mindset that he should have. But nothing really jumped out about the quotes. He's doing a lot of talking with his play, and it's clear that the coaching staff, not just us, has noticed his effort out there. And that's all you can ask for. Are you giving the most amount of effort at any given point as any of these players, but in particular somebody who's very much trying to make this a profession and is on the line one way or the other at a very crowded position group for this team.
What position stands to have the biggest impact made by UDFAs?
Ooh, that's a good question.
I think I'd say running back because of the competition that is there for the third spot. Would Julius Chestnut kind of be in the lead there, or Hassan Haskins?
Guys, former UDFAs?
Sure, yes, because Caleb Murphy comes to mind as well for a team that needs pass rushing depth, who flashed last preseason. So, yes, just UDFAs generally.
There, by the numbers, running back is probably the best percentage pick because of what you're talking about there.
Dylan Johnson, Jabari Small, and, of course, Julius Chestnut.
Wide receiver, there's really not room in the UDFA that you'd be talking about as NWY anyway. So I don't think you can have that discussion. It is an interesting conversation because depth offensive line, I really don't know what the answer to that question is. That's something that has yet to be determined, but I think by the numbers you would probably pick running back right now. So some things happened while I was gone on Friday. Trevor Lawrence got a giant new contract that falls in line with our team previews, and we'll take a pivot into the AFC South, take a look at what the Trevor Lawrence contract means for not just the Jags, but the rest of the division. Mike Wilson will also join us because it was a spectacular weekend for Tennessee baseball. The journey through the College World Series continues. All of that in the second hour, coming up next.
It is 11:01. Good morning. I'm Lucas Panzica from the 104.5 The Zone studios. College baseball, Tennessee is one game away from the College World Series finals after a 4-run comeback capped by a walk-off win over FSU Friday, followed by a 6-1 win over UNC on Sunday. The Vols play again on Wednesday. They await the winner between UNC and FSU, which will be played tomorrow. College World Series action does start at 1 o'clock today. Florida takes on NC State in an elimination game. Texas A&M takes on Kentucky from Omaha at 6 p.m. Bryson DeChambeau is now a 2-time U.S. Open champion after holding off Rory McIlroy to win at 6 under yesterday at Pinehurst. And in NFL news, Bengals wide receiver T. Higgins has signed his franchise tender after missing the offseason program. Higgins will earn $21.8 million this season under the tag. For all your foundation repairs and waterproofing needs, visit USSTN.com. Breaking news at once on your home for the Titans and Vols. This is 104.5 The Zone.
Nothing seems to make Titans fans as happy as when they beat the Jacksonville Jaguars. Wouldn't you say? That's how the season ended in 2023. You sent everything out on a high note. All the bad vibes that had gone down in 2023, basically 2022, because, of course, there was a 7-game losing streak to end that particular season. It made the season finale in Nashville on Sunday, January the 7th, a 28-20 victory to keep the Jags out of the postseason, made it feel like a little bit of icing on what was a pretty terrible cake in 2023. So you send Derrick Henry off on a win. You send Ryan Tannehill out on a win. You send Mike Vrabel out on a win, and you sweep out that era of Titans football, in effect, this offseason. And what do you do with the Jags, who finish at 9-8, second place in the AFC South, but still 9-8. We're one win away, just like the Titans were in 2022, from being able to make the postseason and keep their head above water. I think by that time the Texans had already clinched the AFC South. But still, to make the postseason, Jags had an opportunity to do so. All they had to do was beat the lowly Titans, and they couldn't do that. They were tied for 13th in points per game last year. They were tied for 17th in points allowed last year, and they start this year off, or I guess not start this year off, but in the midst of their offseason, the biggest note is this giant new contract that Trevor Lawrence received on, what was that, Thursday night or Friday?
Thursday afternoon.
Thursday afternoon, so you guys had the opportunity to talk about it on Friday. What was the reaction from the audience when Trevor Lawrence got a deal worth $53 million a year? Basically, he got the same deal as Joe Burrow.
Almost exactly the same. In average annual value, both 55 AAV. I think most of the reaction has been, is Trevor Lawrence good enough to be making the same amount of average annual value as Joe Burrow? No. Trevor Lawrence is not in Joe Burrow's category of NFL quarterback.
Adjusted for inflation, though, it keeps up.
Right. Did the Jacksonville Jaguars kind of have to do this? I think the feeling on that is probably yes.
It shouldn't be the feeling on that is probably yes. Yes, the Jags had to do this. Now, you can be happy about it. If you're a Titans fan, there's probably going to be some Bills fans that are going to be happy when the Dolphins do it with Tua. You know why? Because they have to. They have to. Quarterback play right now, and Trevor Lawrence has not succeeded statistically at even the level that Tua has to date, because you're coming off a campaign for the Dolphins where they did finish second place in their division, but were 11-6. They had an MVP candidate at wide receiver. There was a period of time when Tua was an MVP candidate, and I know Lawrence has gotten some kind of discussion around that stuff before, but never really at any level that's been consistent. Trevor Lawrence has just been, to date, average to slightly above. We understand the circumstances around his rookie season. Now, this offseason, because they're paying now a big old quarterback contract after they went through their offseason preparing to do this, has been something that's been pretty interesting to me. So they keep the staff largely in place, though they do bring in defensive coordinator Ryan Nielsen, who was great last year in Atlanta with no talent. I mean, none. Grady Jarrett went down. He made do with a couple of safeties and Calais Campbell. That was the Atlanta defense last year.
And Bud Dupree.
Yeah, Titans legend, Bud Dupree, correct, who had a really nice year for the Falcons. So they hope to bring in a more concise defense under Ryan Nielsen. They re-signed a lot of players. They did give Ezra Cleveland, the guard, a 3-year contract extension. They did beat the Titans out for Eric Armstead. Titans were interested, reportedly. Eric Armstead goes to Jacksonville instead to fortify their depth here. Not only does Trevor Lawrence become the first $200 million player in the history of the Jacksonville Jaguars franchise, but this is a couple of months after they made Josh Allen, the defensive end, the first $100 million player in the history of the Jags franchise. And the draft class, pretty interesting to look at the strategy here, because for the first time, at least with the Jags, the GM
Trent Baalke.
I wanted to call him Trevor Baalke. Drafts Brian Thomas, the wide receiver, in the first round. They address largely defense the rest of the way through, though they did add some offensive line depth. But Brian Thomas Jr., the wide receiver out of LSU, is what they are saying is justifying letting Calvin Ridley walk. Now, we buying or selling the Jacksonville Jags offseason before we talk about them as contenders? I'm going to say that I'm buying the Jags offseason because they had no choice in the Trevor Lawrence deal. I'm not a huge proponent of Trevor Lawrence as a professional quarterback, but I do think that he is good enough to get you to the places that you are aspiring to go. The division is tough, and they're going to have a hard time keeping pace with the Texans. All three of these other teams are going to have a hard time keeping pace with the Texans. But I do think, in theory, they're still good enough to be sniffing around the postseason.
Good enough to be... Okay, so let's jump to the next question. Are the Jags contenders or pretenders to you?
Pretenders.
So good enough to be a playoff team, but not good enough to be Super Bowl contenders. So you do agree that there is a difference?
To an extent.
Good. Just making sure that's clear. I am so torn on this, buying or selling the Jags offseason. My initial impulse is to sell because I don't know how you can make the argument that they got that much better around Trevor Lawrence. But if Brian Thomas Jr. works out as a rookie and they have that speed element over the top and Christian Kirk has been reliable, and if Gabe Davis can put together any sort of consistency, then you kind of like the wide receiver core, but haven't seen any of that yet. And right now it is inconsistent player in Gabe Davis, unproven rookie in Brian Thomas Jr., and Christian Kirk, just solid, above average wide receiver in the NFL. So until we see anything to prove it otherwise, right now I'm going to say sell. And they've made some improvements on the offensive line. Mitch Morse comes in from Buffalo. He's their center.
The offensive line has been the thing that has been the toughest for them to nail down around Lawrence beyond, his first head coach credit card and co-eds.
It was a problem last year. But for now, I'm going to say sell. And I don't consider this team a contender. And I like Trevor Lawrence more than you like Trevor Lawrence. But I'm going to say sell. Did they get that much better around Trevor Lawrence?
All right, here's the thing. Because I think you have to adjust expectations when talking about some of these teams. You can't get better every offseason. You're not going to get better every offseason. The key here with the Chargers, the Bengals, now the Jags, because they've got one of these quarterback contracts on their books, the same way as the Eagles and the Bills right now, who are having to go through this. Are you good enough? Are you still good enough? Because you're not going to be able, it's impossible in the NFL to incrementally improve every year. It's not feasible. And especially when you are proactive with this, and the Jags were proactive this offseason, clearing cap space. They had a fair amount of cap space that they had to clear, but they knew that they were going to pay Josh Allen because you have to, and they're going to pay Trevor Lawrence because you have to. Once you have those things in place, now it's about how you can win in the margins, not as just a coaching staff or a roster, but as a front office. And so I think it's good enough for them to do some winning. Trevor Lawrence is still an unknown to me, and I shouldn't feel that way for a $55 million a year quarterback. I just shouldn't. So I can look sideways at them when we talk about Super Bowl contention, and this year be proven completely wrong because if he's healthy, which sounds like a huge part of the struggles last year in Jacksonville, he missed a game for the first time in his career. He played through a lot of it, allegedly. I know all those hero worship stories come out after the fact, and the season ends disappointingly, and you see some reports, well, Trevor Lawrence had a procedure or something like that, something to justify the poor play. So I'll stay TBD on Trevor Lawrence and look down on the Jags as contenders while still buying their offseason, because I do think he's good enough. I think he's good enough. The question is, can he be more of a player that elevates a roster, or is Trevor Lawrence something that I think a lot of people would have thought unthinkable around the time of his drafting and even in a few seasons after, which is that Trevor Lawrence may need a lot more help around him to succeed at the kind of level that we're talking about here.
This could be the offseason of quarterbacks getting that type of deal that are good, but are they good enough? Where that's the discussion, right? That feels like the discussion around Tua, Jordan Love, right there in that Trevor Lawrence box. Like, okay, yeah, I see why. I see why you had to do that, but, oh, man, 55, okay. You're putting them next to Joe Burrow and Lamar Jackson and there's, Jared Goff, Justin Herbert.
But they got ahead of Tua and Dak.
Yes,
they got ahead of Tua and Dak because that Burrow contract is last year. So while the numbers are the same, the contract is not the same.
And if you're Jacksonville and you were to say, well, Trevor, why don't you show it to us this year, right? And then you do this a year from now, then what does that number look like? 60 a year, right?
We're going to be talking about, by the time Levis gets ready to cash in, if things go to plan, we're going to be talking about $60 to $65 million a year for a quarterback. Easy. And I'm sure people will have sticker shock, and I'll say, the stickers don't have the sticker shock thing, and then immediately have sticker shock when the first giant contract is given out. But still, it's hard to not look, shocked at that kind of money.
Still, the most interesting thing about this that we talked about on Friday, so Lawrence officially has his deal. The Jags are now into that mode where they're going to have to start maneuvering around that. And the Titans, Colts, and Texans are now in this race to get the absolute most out of their rookie QB deal. Jags blew that race. They wasted a year with Urban Meyer. 2 years later, he's got his deal. And the starting gun fired on that the moment they were drafted. But it just makes it more interesting to me now that Lawrence has his deal. And for those three teams, it's about who's going to be the first, who's going to have to pony up for those rookie second-year quarterbacks that all came from the same draft class, and who's going to have to do it first.
We will pivot back to the NFL later in the noon hour because, again, once we hit the offseason, the list season starts, and then the disrespect from Titans fans is being screamed about all over the internet. So we will get to it because I know it is already out there and you're already foaming at the mouth because of it. But first, we're going to talk about some good things because the University of Tennessee and the baseball team came through this weekend in spectacular fashion with a great 2-0 start, the first 2-0 start for the University of Tennessee baseball program in a College World Series. So we will talk about these games with Mike Wilson of the Knoxville News-Sentinel, who is in Omaha covering the Florida State game and the North Carolina game last night, and we'll see how he's feeling about the Vols here in just a second. I'm Buck Rising. It's 104.5 The Zone. QC Kinetics is here to help you because, of course, you want to be active when the weather is favorable. You want to be able to enjoy this summer as much as you want to, and you can't if you're dealing with joint pain. It's the best time for being outdoors, but not if your knees, shoulders, back, or hips are bothering you. So don't suffer any longer. Call QC Kinetics for non-surgical joint pain relief. They are the nation's leader in regenerative medicine. Joint pain relief with no surgery, no drugs, and no downtime is what they offer. And their advanced treatments harness your own body's ability to restore and repair that damaged joint tissue. So you can walk, run, play golf, hike, move again, pain-free. QC Kinetics is under the leadership of former orthopedic surgeon Dr. Mitchell Shinecup, a true pioneer in the regenerative medicine field. Their advanced protocols have enabled tens of thousands of patients to reclaim their mobility. So stop putting it off, take action now, and live your best life again this summer. Call QC Kinetics for a free consultation, 615-249-4024. That's 615-249-4024. Welcome back to the show. We are fueled by Hattie B's Hot Chicken. I don't know what is fueling Mike Wilson of the Knoxville News-Sentinel while he is doing great journalism in Omaha, Nebraska, covering the University of Tennessee in their College World Series endeavors, which are going very well to date. We'll see how they continue on after huge wins against Florida State and yesterday dropping North Carolina 6-1, winning 2 games in a College World Series consecutively for the first time in program history. And according to Mike's write-up, hadn't won 2 games in a College World Series since 2001. Good morning, Michael.
Buck, you read the things I write. That's so nice.
I do. Listen, occasionally I will admit when somebody knows more than me, which is pretty often when somebody actually knows something more than I do, but it's rare that I'll admit it. So, I keep tabs from time to time.
It's really important to know your weaknesses, that you can turn that into a strength, to be honest.
Well, it's funny because Lucas and Jackson just keep coming up with weaknesses for me, and I keep having to fight them off. So we'll see if I'm not better for it on the other side.
Like mosquitoes.
Yeah, truly, just bloodsuckers, the two of them. Tennessee is sucking the life out of their opponents with the way that they continue to roll through this. The drama of the Florida State win, though, take us through it from your perspective, because I'm watching this on a bunch of cell phones being streamed live from Ron Slay's pre-wedding ceremony on a beach, where the Tennessee fans are thick and going crazy. But I want to know from your standpoint the context of the roller coaster ride that was.
Yeah, well, first off, I hope that whatever endeavor y'all were in was called the Boom Boom Room for obvious reasons.
Yeah,
it was a wild turn. I do think you can look back on it now and say that to some extent Tennessee kind of hinted in the 8th that they weren't dead yet. They had 3 straight 2-out hits that inning, including an RBI single by Dylan Dreiling. But you go in that 9th inning down 3, and it's like, okay, yeah, I mean, what's going to happen? Tennessee had the bottom part of the order coming up. But Kavares Tears' triple was kind of okay. There's still something in play here. Dean Curley's sac fly was good, but to me, the inning said this could happen now when Cannon Peebles walked, because that kind of reset, put a runner on base. It's funny in a way, but you can argue that Cal Stark popping out in foul territory was one of the most important things that happened in the inning, because if he had grounded out there, it's an inning-ending double play and the game's over. Instead, he turns the lineup over to Christian Moore, Blake Burke, Billy Amick, Dylan Dreiling. All of them got hits, so it was absolutely insane to watch. But this Tennessee program's kind of been that way for about 4 years, where they just seem to find a way to win some wonky games.
And then yesterday, a vintage performance from Drew Beam, a really fun pitching performance from both North Carolina and Tennessee until about the 4th inning, where it started to take that turn in favor of Tennessee's lineup. From your standpoint, how sustainable is the pitching moving forward? Because of course they will have to play the winner of this losers bracket between North Carolina and Florida State.
Yeah, well, first off, on Beam, I mean that's the Drew Beam that Tennessee's so used to, especially in big games. He did that in 3 straight postseason starts last year. Hadn't really done it in the postseason this year, so it was really important Tennessee got that, because to parlay to your next question, Tennessee's pitching is set up as good as it can get, because there's a 2-day gap now. They're off Monday, they're off Tuesday, then they play Wednesday. So you've got time. I mean, the only guy really that wouldn't be available in that game is Drew Beam. Everyone else is probably on the table. I think there's some guys you'd prefer not to use and hold them for the next game if there is one in the kind of semifinal regional bracket thing, or to hold them for a game 1 of the championship series. But Tennessee has its pitching lined up exactly how it wants to. And for a team that isn't necessarily the deepest in pitching, going 2-0 in this tournament is the best thing you could have possibly done.
At By Mike Wilson is where you can follow him for updates from the College World Series. You can read his analysis and storytelling at knoxnews.com.
Mike, did Blake Burke check his swing on Friday?
What did the ump say?
Ump said yes.
Well, the ump also said he swung yesterday. So, I thought live Blake Burke did swing from the press box, which is not a good angle to judge a check swing by any stretch of the imagination. I thought he went around then. Replay made me think it was a little more 50-50 than I thought live. man, I'm thankful. You know, I have many years of Little League umpiring experience, like 12U, but I'm very glad I did not have to make that call in that moment, because obviously that was a close call. Whichever way you ruled it, a fan base was going to be going nuts about it. I mean, yeah. And not that an umpire
but how
in that
predictable
moment
was it from Tennessee fans to have it go in their favor and to be justifying it and explaining it online on social media?
Well, Vol Twitter is a place with people that say things.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that is a thing. But, and this has kind of been my comment about it, that check swing kept the game going, but it didn't win the game for Tennessee. It wasn't a check swing with the bases loaded in a tie game that walked in a run. Blake Burke still had to fight the rest of the at-bat and then get a hit to tie it, and then Tennessee had to win it. Florida State still had opportunities to get out of that inning and did not. Now, yes, the game ends if that check swing is called. He went around, but it didn't mean that Tennessee won the game on that play. So I think there is a little piece of logic somewhere in there that despite the anger, the game still could have been dictated in Florida State's way.
I'm sure you're as tired as probably every other Tennessee beat writer at the questions about the Vols' ability to hit the long ball in Omaha. But in the last two trips, certainly that played a role, the inability to carry that offense over that was so dominant during the regular season. So I'm curious, after the weekend where the offense shows up in both outings, the pitching really shows up on Sunday, what did you feel like you needed to see more? That offense finally carrying over to the College World Series for the first time in the Tony V era, or that pitching performance from Drew Beam on Sunday?
I think I just wanted to see Tennessee do what it's capable of, because that's kind of the thing that it didn't do in the other two College World Series appearances, was it didn't play up to what you expected. You look back even at last year's bracket pretty much unfolded exactly as I would have expected. I mean, Tennessee was going to lose to Paul Skeens. I expected they'd beat Stanford, and they did. And then they had the pitching edge with Drew Beam against LSU's kind of who knows what they're going to do sort of staff, but they lost that game. So Tennessee, to me, actually had the upper hand in that LSU matchup. It didn't play up to its standard. It's come into this tournament and played exactly the brand of baseball outside of the first 4 innings against Florida State that it has shown it's capable of all season. It's been impressive. I think hitting the ball obviously is encouraging. But it's not even just the home runs. They're finding the gaps. They're putting hits together. I mean, you look back again, the 8th inning against Florida State was 3 straight singles. The 9th inning had a Christian Moore double, Blake Burke single, Bill Yamick single, Dylan Dreiling single. That would have been a double in a normal circumstance. But they're hitting the ball, period. They do have 4 home runs, but there's a lot of doubles, singles in there as well.
Mike, the elimination game with Florida State and North Carolina, obviously FSU would like another crack at the Vols. It would be more favorable for them to see UNC, would it not?
Yeah, I think so. I think Florida State's lineup is far more serious in terms of a threat. They've been hitting the ball really well in Omaha as well. Probably the second best offensive team so far through this tournament. So, yeah, I think that would be the case.
We talked about the season that Christian Moore has had, the record-setting nature of it, and to have such a big moment in one of the biggest spots in school athletic history. I saw Jason Swain having the conversation online about bringing up Jalen Hyatt's performance, his single-game performance against Alabama, and making that kind of a comparison. Is that, would you put that as a parallel, at least for Vols athletics greats here in the last couple of years? And how would you contextualize just the way that Christian Moore is stepping up in these incredible moments beyond just the day-to-day performance?
Yeah, I mean, I've seen that kind of conversation. You probably put it with Hyatt in about 6 Dalton Connect games from this last season. In terms of like that. That's one you remember. As far as a baseball performance, absolutely insane. They've had some starting pitching that's had some moments like that in really pivotal games that mattered. I mean, obviously, you've had some single moments like Zane Denton's homer, Drew Gilbert's homer, but when you talk about a complete performance, 5 for 6 with a cycle, again, a double that extended the game the other day, it really encapsulates Christian Moore's season. I think he's had the best season in college baseball. I get what Charlie Condon's done. Compare the stats of who they've done it against. I think it's a really important part of that. Christian Moore, for all of his numbers, didn't do any damage against midweek teams. He didn't slug against Queen's University of Charlotte and whatever other schools Tennessee's playing on Tuesdays and Wednesdays. He did almost all of his stuff against SEC teams in the postseason. It's been a remarkable season to watch. So seeing him go and have a performance like that just really summarizes what he's done and who he's been for Tennessee.
Great school, Queen's University of Charlotte. Mike, for me, I do not have a Major League Baseball allegiance. The height of my baseball fandom comes with my alma mater in Tennessee. I'm sure there are many other Tennessee fans that could say the same thing. So for me, Friday night and that comeback and walk-off against FSU was the greatest moment of my baseball fanhood life. Tennessee's been terrible for much of my life in baseball. That was the peak for me. Do you think that was the biggest moment in program history? The walk-off against FSU, obviously, then the conversation changes if they go on to win the College World Series. But for right now, was that the biggest moment in Tennessee baseball history on Friday?
I couldn't hear anything else you said after you said you don't have any baseball allegiance outside of Tennessee. What's wrong with you?
Buddy, you're in the wrong show. We're learning here, Mike. You're helping us. I got nothing. Mike, who do you want me to? I have no connection with the city of Atlanta. There's nothing pulling me towards being a Braves fan. I'm from Nashville. I grew up in Alabama. There's just nothing. I need something, Mike. I need some sort of connection to pull me somewhere if I'm going to be a fan of something. And there's nothing there in that regard in the MLB. There is at the college level.
Well, I know you've been going to Tigers games lately. Take up the Tigers. The old D.
No, they're terrible.
He said, take up the Tigers.
They're terrible,
Mike, we as a show know nothing about baseball, and all three, well, Jackson actually knows things about baseball, but Lucas and I know that the Tigers stink.
They don't stink. They're on the come up. Don't worry. Mm-hmm. Anyway, back to your question, Lucas. If Tennessee goes on and wins this, yes, I still think there's going to always be a place for that Drew Gilbert walk-off grand slam, because how many walk-off grand slams do you see in a lifetime, let alone in that moment? And obviously that sent Tennessee to a College World Series, the first one. So I think you can argue in so many ways that hit set up all of what Tennessee's done the past few years. So there's such an argument to be made there of what that hit meant from a legacy standpoint. Now Tennessee goes on and wins this thing. You look back at so many of those moments in that ninth inning, the check swing, obviously, the Christian Moore turning back to the dugout saying, let's fight, after a 2-1 pitch where he tried to tie the game himself. Dylan Dreiling, who I am on a crusade to remind everyone that he is such a good hitter and a professional hitter at all times. That swing, Blake Burke's swing, so many different moments in that inning you're talking about. So, yes, I mean, that game, that inning will go down in lore regardless, but if Tennessee goes on and wins it, it takes on a whole different legend.
Obviously, Hunter Ensley with a big collision in the center field wall, making that catch early in the second inning against UNC Sunday. Any sort of status update on him for Wednesday and beyond?
Yeah, it sounds like he's day-to-day. Some kind of hip, lower body type injury, because that man hit that wall real hard.
I just saw the replay on my Twitter timeline, Mike. I mean, the adrenaline had to have worn off at some point, and he just got up feeling like hell.
The eye black stayed on the wall for the rest of the game. There's just a patch of eye black from the collision.
Yeah, the video from the side, the left field foul pole, the noise that makes is quite tremendous, if you haven't come across that one yet. So it's day-to-day. The decision was made basically saying Tennessee had a lead, and they knew that Hunter's mobility was slightly limited, and they didn't want to risk with that large outfield him not being able to get a good run on the fly ball with how Drew Beam was pitching. And Drew Beam's a contact pitcher, so having someone who could move around well in the outfield was the decision there.
At by Mike Wilson, KnoxNews.com. Great coverage from Omaha of the Tennessee Vols and their pursuit of a College World Series title. Buddy, we appreciate you stopping by. Thanks for doing it.
For sure. Eat 'em up, Tigers, Lucas.
Is that what they say?
Eat 'em up, Tigers. That's weird. I don't like that at all.
They're great. Thanks, Mike.
No. Did you just make a Frosted Flakes joke?
Yeah, come on. It's right there.
Yeah, just because it's right there. You and Bert need to learn this. Just because it's right there doesn't mean you always have to take it.
If it's right there, I take it.
It's okay to pass every once in a while.
This is the difference between me and you. Cookie in the break room, I take it. Bad joke right there, I take it.
I vote for a boo sound effect for whenever he makes a joke like that.
Well, you have the power, bud.
I was about to say, the beauty of this is I would like it to be run like like a dictatorship. The problem is I have no actual power to be the dictator. You are the only one with actual power to have dictatorship level control over the show.
Careful there.
Yeah, I know. That was close.
Did you see
old Normus came for me there.
Yeah, the old Normus is always in there hiding. Did you see Christian Moore's reaction in the dugout?
This is wild.
When he learned that he just hit for the cycle.
I mean, unbelievable. Unbelievable what a performance. I didn't see the reaction because we were watching it again on a very, very small phone on the beach.
He obviously the home run was all he needed to hit for the cycle and be the second player in College World Series history to do that, first since 1956. And he hits the solo shot to complete the cycle in like the sixth inning and goes back to the dugout. And then the footage of him with teammates surrounding him, seemingly informing him that he just hit for the cycle. And the look of shock, his jaw literally dropped and he's just looking around the dugout like he can't believe what he's being told. And it's insane to me that he didn't know that he didn't step up to the plate knowing that if he hits a home run, he will make history. An all-time performance by Christian Moore as a part of that comeback. And for most of that, I was thinking, man, this individual performance is going to get buried because I don't know that they're going to be able to come back and complete this thing.
And they did it.
And they did, and it was electric. And like I said, it was peak baseball fanhood moment for me as someone who, like the rest of us,
MLB.
Right. I mean, it had to be up there with the greatest moment in program history. For me, it's above the Drew Gilbert moment because, how many walk-off grand slams do you see in your life? How many times do you see somebody hit for the cycle in your life in a game like that? Like, I think the context of the game as a whole has to be wrapped into it. And obviously, all of that goes out the window if they win the College World Series and the national championship will stand alone on that mountaintop. But my goodness, I mean, just an electric moment for that program.
Yeah, but in Tallahassee today, they're doing they should be doing the Florida State choked show. I mean, brutal. Just an absolutely gut-wrenching loss for that program. So we'll see. What time is the North Carolina-Florida State game?
They play tomorrow. So today you have an elimination game starting at 1 o'clock as I'm pulling up the schedule. They will play tomorrow afternoon, and then Tennessee awaits the winner of that game Wednesday at 1 o'clock, which I believe we will have here on The Zone. Tomorrow, this is not going well. Florida State and UNC play at 1.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Dawn Davenport has discovered that I called out her dancing, and now I'm scared.
You did not call out her dancing. Robert did.
No, I did.
Are you sure?
That for
was it you?
Her terrible lack of
Robert
rhythm? Yes.
Robert made the Elaine from Seinfeld comparison.
And so she has tweeted us the Elaine from Seinfeld comparison as a show, and now we should all be scared because Dawn knows that we're talking smack on the air, which is why, among other reasons, you should be listening from 3 to 6. 6-1. Truly, I am in danger. I fear Dawn more now, having gone on that trip to Slay's wedding with her, than I did before. And I was already scared of Dawn. There's a lot of bark from this side of the combativeness between me and Dawn. I actually fear her very, very much, and even more so after this weekend, for good reasons. You have some headlines for me?
I have headlines.
Headlines are next. Welcome back to the show. We are fueled by Hattie B's Hot Chicken. I have lost Lucas for basically the remainder of the show because there are live sports on, and not only are there live sports on, it's soccer. The Euro 2024 competition is going on right now. Copa America begins when?
Sunday, USA takes on Bolivia for the first game. Nashville SC right back Shaq Moore is one of 3 MLS players on the squad.
Were you hurt that Zach Bryan, the country singer, got out there on Twitter when asked about Copa America and said, I only watch American sports, not realizing that we are, of course, competing in Copa America.
Which is being played in America.
Correct.
As well. Yes, that hurt me as someone that is really starting to get into Zach Bryan stuff.
So let's do some headlines, shall we? What do you have?
It's time for headlines with Lucas Panzica.
Oh, my God, that's my least favorite ever.
T. Higgins has signed his franchise tender in Cincinnati. So if you want to call it a holdout, I suppose that's over. He did not participate in mandatory minicamp. He will be playing on the tag in 2024, a number of $21.8 million, after which T. Higgins will be a free agent. This was always probably going to be the outcome.
Always probably.
So it's going to be... What happens next offseason?
What the hell was that? Always probably.
With T. Higgins is going to be interesting, and the timeline of Jamar Chase and his looming contract also going to be interesting for the future of the wide receiver room in Cincinnati.
Yes, because the Jamar Chase contract is the shoe that we are all at this point waiting for to drop. Now, T. Higgins, to Lucas's point, was always probably going to be playing for the Bengals in 2024. They were steadfast about this at the Combine. We actually went over for a good deal of the Bengals media availability at the Combine to speak with both Zach Taylor and Duke Tobin because, famously Titans hired a Bengals coordinator, be their next head coach, and we were interested on some feedback there. But a lot of the discourse was about T. Higgins. No interest in trading him. Better football team with him. That was the company line from the jump, and they stuck with that. Now, the thing for T. Higgins is all he has to do is have a relatively successful season and stay healthy as a part of a relatively successful season, and he'll be able to cash in where he likes next year, unless the Bengals are going to tag him again, which, of course, would spike the price tag of the franchise tag up, and they're not going to do that because they have the Jamar Chase contract looming. So it's the thing that makes the most sense for the Bengals in 2024. I don't know if it makes the most sense for T. Higgins. Sounds like he would have preferred to just get a jump on it, but he's just trying to get paid sooner rather than later. I understand.
It's different for sure. But remember what we talked about with Justin Jefferson last offseason, how he passed on a deal that I think was at that $28 million average annual value mark. And what did he get? 35 AAV after having a dominant season. So I don't think it's the worst thing for T. Higgins, who's coming off the worst year of his career, where his quarterback was injured for the majority of the season, to kind of bet on himself in that way and maybe get even more of a share of the targets with Tyler Boyd out of the door, where it's really about Jamar Chase and T. Higgins in the Bengals wide receiver room in 2024. So I don't think this is the worst situation for T. Higgins and the Bengals. The Detroit Lions have signed UFL kicker Jake Bates to a 2-year deal. He had a 64-yard game-winning field goal for the Michigan Panthers over the St. Louis Battlehawks in the season opener this year, was a kickoff specialist in college at Texas State and Arkansas. And it seems like if there's any pipeline happening with one position from the UFL, I guess now is the USFL/XFL, it is kicker, because look at what's happening with the Cowboys kicker and the story that he is coming from playing soccer his entire life, even in MLS with Toronto, to then after COVID trying out for a UFL team, at the time USFL with Birmingham, making it, and now one of the highest paid kickers in the NFL with the Dallas Cowboys.
So he's been signed to free agent deals with NFL teams before. Did you know this?
This kicker, Bates, that the Lions just signed?
Yeah, he'd been on the Texans roster and the Bucs roster before last year, as a matter of fact, but was released from both teams. So now, of course, they're bringing in the kickoff rules that we've talked about. I have a tinfoil hat type of theory about the Titans and the kickoff rule that we can talk about at some point. We haven't talked about the tinfoil hat there with the Titans and the kickoff rule, have we?
Don't think so.
Okay. I just want to make sure. So we'll do that at some point this week, because I do think that there's an interesting way to turn this into something that is very advantageous for the Titans based on one particular player that we've been talking a lot about for some reason that doesn't play for the Titans. He's a Pittsburgh Steeler right now. But either way, we have time for that.
Interesting.
That's a weird sigh.
Veteran safety Tony Jefferson is coming out of retirement.
Yeah, what are we doing?
At the age of 32 to reunite with a few people that used to be involved with the Baltimore Ravens. I suppose he's reunited with Greg Roman, who was the offensive coordinator when he was a Raven, and a couple of former Ravens players that are also coming over to play for Jim Harbaugh and the Chargers. But Tony Jefferson, who announced his retirement a year ago, May 25th, 2023, announced he would retire from professional football and would be joining the Ravens in a scouting capacity. Now at the age of 32,
Dyslexia.
he is coming out of retirement and signing with the LA Chargers.
Well, that tells you everything about the safety market, doesn't it? That teams would rather just pay bargain basement for a 32-year-old dude that's been out there on the street than give Justin Simmons, this kind of money that he's probably looking for. That I think is a good thing for Titans fans to see and kind of reel back whatever expectations they might have of just saying, hey, you've got the money, just give it to him. Just give it to him. And the rest of the NFL is doing things like Tony Jefferson on a team that's thinking about competing and contending in the Los Angeles Chargers. So, I mean, he has been in 113 total games with the Cardinals, the Ravens, the Niners, and the Giants throughout the course of his career. And then he's had a good career to date. What this looks like on the back end, whether he's on the roster to start the regular season, remains to be seen. But it is at least interesting and indicative of what the safety market looks like right now.
And finally, Kansas City defensive lineman Isaiah Buggs was arrested for the second time in the span of 1 month. This time, he was booked on domestic violence and burglary charges in Alabama. This was on Sunday morning. The first arrest earlier this month, that was for 2 misdemeanor counts of animal cruelty. A pretty gross story out of Tuscaloosa about neglecting a couple of dogs, and it's just an ugly story. And Isaiah Buggs back in the news for that. He was an acquisition of the Chiefs this past offseason after spending the last couple of years with the Detroit Lions.
Those are the headlines?
Those are the headlines.
Excellent. Very good. So, Dawn Davenport, as I said, has discovered that we have been making fun of her dance moves. Apparently, she's in the building. And now I'm extra scared. So I don't know if Dawn is going to make an appearance in the final hour. But I think it is worth keeping your head on a swivel for as we get ready to dive into some Titans subject material. The Titans tax, what is it? I heard Ramon Foster use this term, as a matter of fact, on 3HL last week before we all left for Slay's wedding. There has never been a better example of what it is that payers pay to come play for the Titans. The Titans tax. We'll explain it to you coming up next.
It is 12 o'clock. Good afternoon. I'm Lucas Panzica from the 104.5 The Zone Studios. College baseball, Tennessee is one game away from the College World Series finals after a 4-run comeback capped by a walk-off win over Florida State on Friday, followed by a 6-1 win over UNC on Sunday. The Vols will play again on Wednesday. They await the winner between UNC and FSU. That game will happen tomorrow. College World Series action starts today from Omaha at 1. Florida takes on NC State in an elimination game. Texas A&M takes on Kentucky today at 6 p.m. In NFL news, Bengals wide receiver T. Higgins has signed his franchise tender after missing the offseason program. Higgins will earn $21.8 million this season under the tag. And Game 5 of the NBA Finals is tonight in Boston. The Celtics hold a 3-1 lead over the Mavericks. Dallas routed Boston in Game 4 on Friday. Tip-off tonight is at 7:30. For all your foundation repairs and waterproofing needs, visit USSTN.com. Breaking news at once on your home for the Titans and Vols. This is 104.5 The Zone.
Final hour is upon us. Welcome in. We have a little breaking news-ish.
Breaking television news, I suppose.
It's sports television news. I think it counts. Just the faint feels so good. By the way, is our Open getting canceled because of Diddy?
I mean, we could change it. We could afford to change it.
I was hoping you wouldn't bring it up.
Yeah.
Well, now we got to change
now
it.
We have to change it.
It was out of sight, out of mind for me.
I'm sorry. You're one of these people that has to be dragged into change. You're not willing to just adapt when things are problematic. You can't just let it go by. You're out here screaming against the wokeness and the cancel culture.
The song is by Mace.
Yeah.
Who screams at the beginning, Lucas?
Is there any proof that that's Diddy? Show me the proof.
Yeah, it's literally on the producing credits. It's literally embedded into the record.
Damn it, Diddy.
We will take a show vote, and we will determine whether or not we are canceling the show Open at some point. Because I could use a change. I could use a little change up, not just because Diddy, is deeply problematic at this point in time. Anyway, we need to talk about the Titans tax. So, what is the Titans tax? When I say that phrase to the two of you,
hold on, you didn't even say what the news was.
I forgot the news. Yeah, in season Hard Knocks is the AFC North.
Ta-da. The AFC North, and you sounded like you were like AFC. You made a face at that. Like, why would anybody want to follow the AFC North?
No.
When we just did this last week, the most compelling NFL division, and at least half of the audience said the AFC North is the most interesting division in the NFL.
Sure, but my concern is I want to see the actually interesting stuff. And the teams, I assume they're going to be on less. Like, you can't get one team to do it all the time because you don't want to be the Indianapolis Colts who have a ridiculous Jim Irsay in a hat sitting in a locker room very depressed after didn't they get shut out by the Jags in that game that they had on camera afterwards where the Colts missed the postseason in the AFC South, and Frank Reich is delivering his message to the locker room, and the camera's just locked in on Jim Irsay looking like a dope. Nobody wants that. So my initial reaction is, they're going to limit the amount of times that these teams are actually on camera for the in-season Hard Knocks, so they're just going to get even further shrinking of the actually interesting stuff. Was my reaction. Not about the division. It's just about the access. That's all. Okay. Can we move on now?
Yes.
When I say Titans tax, what do you think?
Think of the we suck tax that we've talked about on having to overpay for players to come play for you when you're trying to rebuild something, not necessarily from scratch, but a makeover of sorts. You find yourself having to overpay free agents that maybe could have taken less in a better situation. So that is largely what comes to mind for me. What are you talking about?
Well, this was a thing that I heard when I was leaving on Thursday. I heard 3HL talking about this specifically, and they brought up Pro Football Focus rankings. Because you're right, Titans did pay what we were talking about this offseason, which is the we suck luxury tax. Teams that are bad have to overpay for talent that is average to above average to try and get back to base level competency. Very much fits the description of the Titans this offseason. They had money to spend. They spent it. They're a better football team for it. Even if the players who are getting top of the market-esque contracts aren't exactly the best players at every position that they sign deals to. So this version is because of a ranking that came out. And it's a ranking about centers. Now, normally, you're not going to get a lot of controversy out of the center rankings, are you?
Normally.
One would think that you're just going to gloss over the list in the midst of list season. In fact, Pro Football Focus probably didn't think they were even going to piss this many people off because they started with the center at what I'm sure is a series of positional rankings for the starting 32 players of the position. If I told you that Lloyd Cushenberry was the 14th ranked center, coming off what Pro Football Focus is describing as a career year, would that surprise you? No context, just that he's 14th. Above average in the NFL. If they're ranking 32 centers, Lloyd Cushenberry 14th.
Above average, barely. Like that.
Barely
that
above
puts
average.
More if you're going to go with 14th, that is middling in the NFL.
Sure.
Which is not what we consider Lloyd Cushenberry to be.
No, we consider Lloyd Cushenberry is making the most guaranteed money for a center in the history of football. Now, again, some of this is the we suck luxury tax. But also, as Pro Football Focus mentions here, he's coming off a career year. So if I then add to it the context, Aaron Brewer is ranked 11th.
Spicy.
Buddy, that is the Titans tax. This is a place, we talk about the level of disrespect that Titans fans regularly feel, some warranted, some not, about how their franchise is discussed, about the way that people talk about the players that play for this team.
The Rodney Dangerfield of the NFL.
Truly. If that's a great comparison by you.
But how many teams say that? How many teams, fan bases in the NFL say that?
But how many times have other teams been forgotten that they play in their entire division? They just put the Colts twice in a ranking, in a slideshow, or something like that. How many places have Will Levis ranked 32 out of 32 starting quarterbacks behind quarterbacks that haven't been drafted yet and pre-Russell Wilson and Justin Fields getting traded to their respective new destinations? How many clubs actually have that? Not just around them, but written into their DNA a little bit, okay? When you talk about the Rodney Dangerfield of the NFL, spot on. That is the Tennessee Titans. No respect. So, am I going to get bent out of shape about a center ranking? Probably not. Do I find it completely ridiculous that a center coming off a career year that has been a starter since his rookie season and was a full 16-game starter in his rookie season is ranked 3 spots below a 275-pound center that against any average-sized defensive lineman in the NFL gets picked up and crushed just because he's kind of a good run blocker in certain situations? I'm telling you, I out loud ugly cackled when I read this because I'm like, oh my God, the persecution complex that Titans fans feel is only going to be hyped up that much more because of a center ranking. It's the least disrespectful place to find the most disrespect. Aaron Brewer, 3 spots above Lloyd Cushenberry. I can't get over it. That is the Titans tax. I can't steal that term because Ramon Foster coined it. And Ramon, I think, has a particularly good understanding of this. He comes from one of these legacy franchises. The Pittsburgh Steelers are one of the most winning organizations in the NFL. When you talk about clubs that do things the right way, that are thought about at a higher standard, they are like of that DNA. And then you got old Rodney Dangerfield in here stumbling around, giving the center the most money at his position in the history of the sport, saying no respect as they rank Aaron Brewer 3 spots ahead of Lloyd Cushenberry. I can't stop laughing at that.
I paid my center top of market money. They put him 15th in the rankings. We don't get no respect. Aaron Brewer, the blurb says...
That's a terrible Rodney Dangerfield.
Brewer spent... Yeah, that one's not in my wheelhouse.
He went in there with great confidence like Mickey Mouse and then just tripped.
It says... Brewer spent 1 season as the Titans starting center before signing a 3-year, $21 million contract with the Dolphins. He is known more for his run blocking abilities, earning a 6th-ranked 78.7 run blocking grade in 2023. The Dolphins will hope Brewer can improve as a pass blocker.
The Dolphins game is one of the games where Brewer was the worst. Like, they saw him do this against that team, the team that paid him $21 million this offseason. I cannot make sense of this. There is no way that you can justify this to me.
I suppose a lot of it is based on PFF grades, on how they graded out these players with their metric.
Sure, but if your grades are dumb, you need to account for that stupidity, right? If you come out with the grade and you look at it and say, well, that doesn't make any damn bit of sense at all. If you've actually watched these two players play, then you should come away with thinking, maybe we need to readjust our grading tools here because this is completely nonsensical, unless, of course, it leads to discussion about this godforsaken list, which is exactly what they've designed it for.
Yeah, I don't know how many coaches and players around the NFL will tell you that Aaron Brewer is a better center than Lloyd Cushenberry.
None of the ones that have played against the two of them, that's for damn sure. 615-737-1045 is the number if you want to join the discussion. Let's go with Kyle, who's a plumber.
What's going on, boys?
Hey, buddy.
I got a good example of Titans tax for you.
Hit me with it.
Have you seen how much the NFL has been talking about Derrick Henry this year on social media?
Truly. I was having this discussion the other day with somebody. I can't remember if it was on the air or off the air, but Derrick Henry's offseason movements have been covered more this year than at any point in his 8-year damn near Hall of Fame career. It's wild.
Slap the man in another color, and he's a superstar.
Man runs for 2,000 yards, one of the best running backs in franchise history. He puts on purple, now everybody's talking about him. We don't get no respect.
Oh, please stop that. You have to stop that. Why are you going to lean into the bad impression? Rodney Dangerfield's not Italian. You're making him Italian.
Is that where I was going?
Yeah, I'm confused. You're doing something. Thank God you're Italian. Otherwise, people would accuse us of stereotyping.
Not my best.
What do you got, Jackson?
So did you guys see the NFL's video where they showed every offensive lineman drafted in the first round -1?
No, they didn't leave out Latham.
They left out Latham, the second offensive lineman taken in the draft.
Wait, this is the NFL that did this?
The NFL's Twitter account.
Can you show me this or without? Because I haven't seen this myself, so I don't want to just take your word for it. I don't trust you very much.
Joseph showed it to me around draft night, and he just reminded me of it just now. He's frantically looking for it in his bookmarks because he keeps receipts.
There is not, well, that's scary. There is not a more persecuted fan base by the league that they enjoy being fans of than the Tennessee Titans fan. I'm convinced. I'm convinced. I didn't think it was real when I started covering this team. After this is going to be my 8th season, I'm absolutely convinced that people are just out to get you at this point. It's the only way that they can tell that you're there. They just whack the beehive every once in a while to make sure you still got a pulse. God almighty. The NFL All-Breakout Team. We're going to have a bit of a snake draft around here. Players across the NFL, not specific to the Titans, that we would pick. We're each going to get 3 selections, and you can join the conversation if you want to. Which player in the NFL on a rookie contract is best poised for a breakout year? We'll talk about it. 615-737-1045 is the number. I'm Buck Rising. It's 1045 The Zone. The Tennessee Men's Clinic is here to help you if you are struggling with erectile dysfunction. And if you are, it's okay. It's nothing to freak out about. It happens to half of dudes. At least 50% of men as they age deal with ED. If you've put it off for way too long, it's time to get the help you need and move forward with your sex life. And the Tennessee Men's Clinic is the leader in bedroom confidence for that reason. The reality is that pills often quit working and guys start making excuses for not being intimate. And most dudes hate going to the doctor, but the Tennessee Men's Clinic is an experience specifically designed to take care of you and has been operating for over a decade here in Middle Tennessee. The urologist and providers at the Tennessee Men's Clinic have helped guys with ED and weight loss, and they now even offer aesthetic enhancements and cosmetic procedures. They even offer same or next day appointments. So call them. It's time to feel amazing and hit your goals this year. Stop thinking about it and go visit the Tennessee Men's Clinic. 615-208-9090. That's 615-208-9090, or go online to TennesseeMen'sClinic.com and book an appointment today.
Pick in the 2024 NFL Draft, the Los Angeles Chargers select Joe Alt, tackle, Notre Dame. With the 11th pick in the 2024 NFL Draft, the New York Jets select Olu Fashanu, tackle, Penn State. With the 14th pick.
Jackson's playing a tweet that is on the NFL's main account that says, and I quote, in one of the most ridiculous ways fashion, offensive tackles were in high demand. 8 were drafted in the first round, tied for the most ever. And then what did they do? You heard Joe Alt, selected 5th overall, and then immediately the supercut that the NFL put together skips the 7th overall pick where the Titans take the second tackle off the board to go to the Jets pick at 11, where what did Roger call him there? Olu Fashanu or whatever? Ola Fashanu goes from Penn State to the Jets, and nobody's there to see J.C. Latham. Do you think you know what? Did Goodell make the pick into the mic, or were they in a commercial break?
They made the pick. It's a first-round pick.
Every pick in the first round gets made on camera, right? Because this is a joke that we've been having in the Titans media room on draft night for years. Every pick is when the NFL, every Titans pick is when the NFL chooses to go to commercial break on both networks, ESPN and the NFL Network. I swear to God, it's a thing. So I was thinking for a second, maybe they just didn't have Raj reading the name into the mic because they went to commercial break before the 7th pick.
We don't get no respect.
I really need you to stop that. He's watching Rodney Dangerfield highlights during the commercial break to try and get better at this.
Get the biggest prospect in the first round. They said, why was 6 afraid of 7? Because 7, 8, 9. They didn't even include 7 in the video. We don't get no respect.
I don't understand what is giving you the confidence to try all these impressions now, because I want to kill it.
That's pretty good.
Okay. So, who is going to be actually good in the NFL this year that you're kind of on the fringe about? Last year, one of the most popular picks league-wide for a breakout candidate was Chigakonkwo. A lot of people around the NFL, fantasy football people, looking at sleepers and stuff like that, looked at Chig, said, he's tight end 1 for the Titans definitively. This should make all the sense in the world. He's a very athletically gifted player for a Chig, a 4th round pick?
4th rounder.
4th round or 5th round? Hassan Haskins was the 5th round pick, I want to say.
Yeah, Chig, 4th round out of Maryland.
Okay. So for Chig, looked at it as a sleeper. Season didn't go to plan. Last quarter of the season was salvageable for him, but the first 3 quarters were really, really a rough go. Then you look at the breakout candidates around the NFL this year, and I thought it might be fun if we all 3 got to pick 3 players in the NFL who we think is going to have a breakout season. So we're going to snake draft this thing. I'll start with the 1st overall pick, and then Jackson we'll get to. We'll work counterclockwise around the room here. I struggled with this because a big part of me wanted to take Will Levis, and I think that's a super obvious one here locally. But I really do buy what they're selling about this, and I think he's good enough to do it. My concern is not that he's not talented enough. My concern is, can they rein it in enough to make it the kind of game manager that he needs to be to have a lot of success in this offense? I think that Will Levis is perfectly equipped to truly make a leap. Whether he does it or not is going to be incumbent upon him. But if I had the 1st overall pick out of players who I think could stand to take a legitimate jump based on their circumstance, I think I'm going to go with Will Levis.
Is Will Levis the Titans player at the top of this list then, if you're taking him with that 1st pick?
Has to be.
Because if we're moving along with Titans players, I feel like the next name that you say has got to be either Tyjae Spears or Peter Skoronski. Personally, in terms of the situation and how it's improved around them and how that stands to benefit them directly with their numbers in 2024. And at first I was hesitant to say Tyjae Spears because of the way he's going to be splitting reps with Tony Pollard. But then Jackson pointed out, we were talking before the show, wasn't he splitting snaps with Derrick Henry?
Yep.
And
to an extent. Snaps, yes.
Those numbers could reflect very differently from last year to this year because Spears was the obvious receiving back out of the backfield, whereas Pollard can do some of that stuff too. That's the whole point, right? You can utilize both of them in similar ways. But the only thing, apart from injury, holding Tyjae Spears back from having a massive leap in terms of production is however much time Tony Pollard spends on the field. But that didn't hold back Jahmyr Gibbs last season, who had a great rookie year, splitting reps with David Montgomery. I think that's another guy who could be a candidate for this. But if we're stepping outside of the Titans, is it fair to say Bijan Robinson?
That's where I was going to go. That's what I was between.
But that's a guy, like you're talking about a guy who had 1,500 all-purpose yards last season. So what does a breakout look like for Bijan Robinson, who was right on the cusp of a 1,000-yard rushing and almost 500 yards receiving last season, yet we talk about him as underutilized in 2023.
How many touches did he get total? I'll pull it up on Pro Football Reference so I have the exact number, because that to hear 1,500 all-purpose yards last year is surprising to me.
214 rushes last season for Bijan, 58 catches.
976 yards rushing, 487 yards receiving. Damn, that's pretty good.
Yeah. So what does a breakout season look like for Bijan after those rookie numbers?
Well, the yards per attempt, 4.6 is also still pretty good. Like, I guess I'm surprised. I mean, the Falcons had a bad year because the quarterback played. That's a little validating, I think, for Art. Honestly, if you just look at Bijan's production and stuff like that, and I know he was under some fire for how they handled an injury situation with him too in the middle of a season, but I think he's still worth a pick here. So are you going to settle on Bijan Robinson?
I will select Bijan Robinson.
But you're right. That's a pretty high bar, Jackson.
I'm also going with the Atlanta Falcons. I think Drake London is poised for a breakout year.
Okay. Now he went from having no quarterbacks to two quarterbacks, so you think that's enough to get him over the top?
Well, yeah, because the quarterbacks for his career so far has been Marcus Mariota, Desmond Ridder, and Taylor Heineke. Not exactly a recipe for success.
Titans legend. Don't you disrespect him.
He still had 866 yards his rookie year, 905 last year. Not bad. 6 total touchdowns in 2 years. I just think with a veteran presence in Kirk Cousins, and then if Michael Penix has to play, he's going to need a security blanket. I think Drake London could be that. I'm picking Drake London.
All right. You have 2 picks.
Didn't think about the snake draft thing. Come back to me.
I literally just did, and you didn't have a pick. You can't just make one on the spot. You can't think of a single other NFL player that you think is capable of making a leap. I told you to have 3. Dalton Kincaid?
Yeah.
That's a good submission, actually.
With the wide receivers departing in free agency, they lose Gabe Davis, they lose Stephon Diggs. Josh Allen sees a familiar face in Dalton Kincaid, and the second-year tight end makes a leap in year 2. Recipe for success in Buffalo. Now it's Lucas's pick.
How hard was that?
It wasn't that hard. I just had to think of his name.
I'll keep it at receiver and go with Jaden Reed as a guy going from year 1 to year 2, because he, like Jordan Love, got better as the season went on, and we talk about that back half of the season by Jordan Love and how that's what he can be. That is what could get him into that Trevor Lawrence echelon of money, if we're talking about that happening for Jordan Love before the start of the season. Where are we on that, by the way? Like, are we at a point where we expect Jordan Love to get his deal before the start of the regular season? After a half season of the level that he needs to be at.
I honestly would. I think if Green Bay had their choice in the matter, I think they would rather just have a solution on it, put a bow on it, because he does seem viable.
Yeah.
The way that he played down the stretch to the end of the year was as good as any quarterback in football.
Yeah, and Jaden Reed obviously benefited from that as well. But the way they were able to get him into space with the ball in his hands, jet sweeps, things of that nature to utilize his speed, he ended up with 64 catches for 793 yards and 8 touchdowns. If Jordan Love does take that leap in terms of consistency across an entire season, I don't know that anybody will benefit from it more directly than Jaden Reed. So he's the next player I would pick in this draft.
Well, I'm a little mad that you took a Packers wide receiver, because mine was also a Packers wide receiver, and Romeo Doubs was going to be my pick. Because I do think that is such a young skill. I mean, it's just a young offense generally, especially now that Bakhtiari is released and they're resetting the board at left tackle. The wide receivers are almost all exclusively on rookie deals.
Josh Jacobs, the grizzled vet of that group.
Yeah, truly. And he's like 26. So I like Romeo Doubs and that continued. I mean, you could have gone Christian Watson here. You could have gone Romeo Doubs. But Watson already feels like he's their top option. I kind of feel like he's successfully made the leap as one of the. We're not talking about him as one of the best wide receivers, but he comes up, I think, pretty near the top of the list when you talk about playmakers, just for example, in the NFC. Doubs is an interesting one. He's definitely the 2 there. And depending on how this year goes for Jaden Reed, he may be the 3. But I would take him in that offense just because the entire offense seems to be ascending, and I think there's going to be a lot more mouths to feed. Now, the third one I had to think about, and I'm going to go Kyle Pitts, because if it doesn't happen this year for Kyle Pitts, it's not happening, right? Like Kyle Pitts is the Trevor Lawrence of tight ends.
Okay. We act like Kyle Pitts has put up nothing. He has done nothing since he entered the league. How many tight ends in the last decade have had 1,000-yard seasons?
Not many. And certainly the first round, the first round list is even smaller than that because it's just him, right?
And he's one of them, right? Yeah. And it was his rookie year. What has he had at quarterback since then?
Marcus Smart, the same thing that
Jackson
just listed off. So no, there is a supercut alone of Marcus Mariota overthrows and underthrows in the direction of Kyle Pitts. But you can't, and this is why I wish draft analysts or people talking about the draft would stop using the G word about prospects, all right? Generational, there really aren't that many. Tight end conversation, we talked about Kyle Pitts is generational, and then what happened? Brock Bowers, arguably a better all-around tight end prospect, came out a few years later. So I wish for Trevor Lawrence, for Kyle Pitts, for other players at any position, Jamar Chase, that people would stop with the generational stuff, because I just don't think that you can do that fairly and ever live up to those expectations. Because they're both good NFL players, but they're not above average special the way that I think most people would expect them to when you go as the 4th overall pick in the case of Kyle Pitts, or number 1 overall in the case of Trevor Lawrence. All right, your turn.
I'm going to go to the defensive side, and a defensive back that flashed as a rookie and now has one of the best defensive head coaches in the NFL in Mike McDonald. That is Seattle defensive back Devin Witherspoon.
That's a good one.
Witherspoon showed the ability to play outside and in last season, the ability to hover around the line of scrimmage, 10 pressures and 3 sacks for a cornerback his rookie year. If I'm a Seahawks fan, I am very excited about how Mike McDonald can utilize Devin Witherspoon and his versatility in his first year as the Seahawks head coach.
Well, because you could have gone with the other one, too. You could have gone with Reek Woolen.
Easily.
Jackson?
I'm going to go with the Titan. I'm going Peter Skoronski. Just elevated talent all around him on the offensive line. So I think he'll be poised for a breakout season in 2024.
What's a breakout season look like for a left guard?
We don't mention him.
Yeah, we don't. This is the last time we mention him.
Yeah,
I would love to not talk about him at all anymore.
Exactly. That's a breakout season. We talk about him in week 18. Wow, Peter Skoronski. We never talked about him at all. What happened to that guy?
You know how much I don't want to even say looking forward to, because I don't know that they're going to work right away. We had this conversation on Thursday before we left. Like, I think people have some kind of expectation the Titans' offensive line is going to be good, and I don't. Maybe eventually, maybe at some point, but right out of the gate, I'm still looking at it with a bit of a side eye. I think that was fun. All right, so Jackson, who's your team?
Drake London, Dalton Kincaid, Peter Skoronski.
Lucas?
Bijan Robinson, Devin Witherspoon, and Jaden Reed.
And I've got Will Levis, Kyle Pitts, and Romeo Doubs. So are you the only person that took a defensive player?
I think so. And it is probably malpractice that we left Will Anderson out of this. When you talk about somebody surrounded by a better situation that stands to make a leap, coming off a defensive rookie of the year.
That's what I'm saying. Can you, the story is more if he does not at least match his production as opposed to makes a significant leap, right? If he underperforms or if he falls short of what he did as a rookie.
7 sacks as a rookie. If he gets that number into double digits, are we not calling that a breakout year for Will Anderson as a bona fide star at pass rusher.
I just think you have a harder time making like it's almost like, and I know this is to a different extent, and the quarterback position is much different, but it's almost like arguing that C.J. Stroud's going to have a breakout year.
Sure.
You know what I'm saying?
But Stroud had numbers that any team
rookie has ever seen.
would love for its starting quarterback to have, regardless of age or time in the NFL.
He had 4,000 yards passing, right?
Yes.
Yeah, the Titans haven't had that in 25 years of Titans football.
That's right.
Yes, of course they would take that and run.
And then another name I kind of on the outside, I'd call him a UDFA. How about Zamir White? Zamir White, the Raiders running back, who last season, buried on that depth chart, had 451 yards rushing on 104 attempts.
Did you have an outside looking in list?
He is, this is my UDFA in our breakout players draft. But, I mean, if you're talking about fantasy football purposes, which we don't do often on this show, Raiders are going to have to lean on their run game, address the offensive line in the offseason, and Josh Jacobs is no longer there. He's in Green Bay, which I think is one of the most forgotten about moves in the NFL this offseason. Like, is there a move more buried down there in the news cycle than, Josh Jacobs is a Packer?
That Aaron Jones is a Viking.
Right, yeah, exactly.
Weird. That whole swapped running back thing is weird.
All the running back movement is going to be, people are going to be like, Joe Mixon is a Texan, and Zach Moss is a Bengal, and Josh Jacobs is a Packer. We're going to have all these realizations throughout the course of the season. But I'm intrigued. I'm intrigued by just the situation in Vegas generally.
That's our Bucks this year, right? That's kind of like nobody has any expectations of them whatsoever, and if they mess around and do something with Gardner Minshew and Antonio Pierce, it'll be one of the bigger talking points of the season.
But I think again, Baker's ceiling was always going to be higher than Gardner Minshew's ceiling as a starting quarterback.
Coming up next, we have an Olympian right out of Nashville. We're going to tell you about Virginia star Gretchen Walsh and how she's connected to the Middle Tennessee area. Coming up next. Welcome back to the show. We are fueled by Hattie B's Hot Chicken. We've got an Olympian that's qualified for her first from the Middle Tennessee area. Congratulations to Gretchen Walsh, who qualified for her first Olympics, record-setting fashion over the weekend. She's a graduate of the Harpeth Hall School and set a world record in the 100-meter women's butterfly on Saturday at the U.S. Olympic swimming trials. So she captured her semifinal heat in 55.18 seconds at Lucas Oil in Indianapolis. I didn't realize that they were doing. Lucas Oil's capable of being an Olympic swimming trials venue? I did not realize that. Okay. She broke Swedish swimmer Sarah Sorenstrom's 55.48 mark from 2016. So congratulations to Gretchen Walsh, who becomes immediately the most famous Walsh here in Nashville, dropping Robert Walsh to at least third place on that list.
At least. Very cool.
Will we have an NBA champion by the time this show reconvenes tomorrow morning? Because Dallas does what they need to stave off the sweep. No team has ever come back from 3-0. Tonight in Boston has huge implications, but I still feel like we're just waiting for the moment where the Celtics are going to do what they've done all season, which is just roll efficiently and boringly, or be boring, in pursuit of winning a championship, because they haven't done it in any kind of way that would like fascinate you or excite you or have drama around it. They've just been methodical with their winning.
I thought we were going to have the first year since 1995 where the Stanley Cup Finals and NBA Finals both are a sweep in the same season.
How about the Panthers?
It's interesting, the parallels between the NBA Finals and the Stanley Cup Finals right now, because you have one side in each series that is the flashy, star-studded, fun-to-watch Dallas Mavericks, Edmonton Oilers. Yet it's the other side, Boston Celtics, Florida Panthers, that have been the efficient, grinded-out, elite defensive team that take a 3-0 series lead, and then Edmonton comes alive in Game 4. They dominate the Florida Panthers to avoid the sweep. The Dallas Mavericks come alive in Game 4, dominate the Celtics to avoid the sweep, and now we head to Game 5 in both series. I don't know who would be more likely to make a comeback. I would say the Oilers. It is not likely for either of them, but I hope they keep both series alive as long as possible. But I'd say the Celtics probably going back, considering how poorly the Mavericks played, how poorly Kyrie Irving played in games 1 and 2 in Boston. Now that they're back at TD Garden, I think the Celtics just close this out. And we'll see what happens with Oilers and Panthers tomorrow.
0-156 are teams that have gone down 3-0 in an NBA playoff series. So the window is slightly more wide open for Dallas to try and do it. It will be interesting to see whether or not that they can do it on Boston's floor, as Lucas mentioned. Now, there can be some freedom in that, right? When you know it's just house money, when you understand that, I think Blaine was talking about this, it must have been Thursday that I heard him on the air talking about the idea of just at that point playing for pride and avoiding the sweep and having been on bad teams before and, avoiding the shutout or whatever the case might be. Like just that general freedom that comes with, all right, there's literally nothing else to lose but the end of the season. And yes, while that is of huge consequence and it's the NBA Finals, so you want to give it your best effort every time out, I do think that it can take a little bit of the edge off, ironically enough, and allow for a better and more free-flowing product if you're Dallas in this situation. Whether or not they actually stave off elimination, unlikely. But to at least keep the series alive, I think they're capable. Last call for phone calls. If you got them, 615-737-1045 is the number if you want to jump in. A couple of people chiming in from our earlier discussions from the quarterback situation, talking about breakout players or players that we think are poised for a breakout. Chris Frazier on YouTube saying that Pitts had Marcus, Kyle Pitts, who was one of my selections, has Marcus as the quarterback for a bulk of his career at Atlanta. That was the problem. And somebody else mentioning Devon Achane with the Miami Dolphins having a breakout year. Raheem Mostert doing the unthinkable for a 31-year-old running back. He had 20 rushing touchdowns last year.
Franchise record.
Unbelievable.
18, though. 18, I believe.
But still, close to 20, and 18 is a ton. of times finding the end zone, especially as a running back of an advanced age who's still got the speed and burst to make it happen. But it does feel like they've got the succession plan in Miami, not just with Achane, but with Jalen Wright out of Tennessee, who kind of fits that same mold.
The crazy thing about Mostert is he never even remotely touched those kind of numbers previously in his career.
Which is crazy which also crazy because he was in San Francisco.
Right.
Like that's the thing that catches your attention, because San Fran has done that with running backs before, and Mike McDaniel, of course, was in San Francisco for a good part of that. So I think putting him in that speed and space offense, which is what you kind of hope for the Titans, right? That's what you're hoping to do to teams, spread it out with your passing game, make them fear the threat of a 3 wide receiver set, lighten the box for the running backs to gouge you for 5 and 6 yards a carry. Ready for some polls? Let's do it. Oh, they waved it off. They waved off a goal?
Presented by Two Rivers Ford, the South's most trusted Ford dealer. What was the more legendary individual performance? Jalen Hyatt against Alabama in 2022 or Christian Moore against Florida State in the College World Series on Friday? 72% are going with Hyatt against Bama. Goody says the answer should always be the postseason situation, but UT had been battered for so many years against Bama. In this case, it will be Jalen Hyatt.
Let's have that discussion on radio tomorrow, because we had planned for it in case we didn't keep Mike Wilson the entire time, or unless you don't think we need to have the discussion. I personally would go with Christian Moore because of the postseason implications, but it is that much harder because of the Bama Bear that had been on your back for that long, and do it at Neyland Stadium, and to have Bryce Young really pushing you at the end for it. The implications of that are not lost on me. I still would take the Christian Moore performance given the implications of a College World Series.
Yeah, the discussion has to be in the context of what it means for that respective program, right? Because football is a bigger deal than baseball. The football moment is always going to beat the baseball moment, but just consider the context for that program. I think you could make an argument the SEMO moment was a bigger deal for Tennessee baseball, but certainly both sides would have a great argument. Which Titans UDFA are you most interested in following this camp? Brian says Gabe Jeudy-Lally. Kenneth says Dylan Johnson, the running back out of Washington. Willie is going with a UDFA from a previous year, and that is Otis Reese.
So converted safety to linebacker out of Ole Miss, Otis Reese. Guy who was talked about, one of the preseason discussion points, right? A guy who played a fair amount of snaps, showed you a little something, did get some snaps in the regular season due to injury down the stretch, but they brought in linebacker help in Cedric Gray. They have also brought in Kenneth Murray. I got some questions about Kenneth Murray. I'll be honest, I haven't watched him a ton, Kenneth Murray, individually.
We haven't really talked about him at all.
We haven't talked about him at all. Now, again, without pads on, how much judgment are you doing of linebackers and linemen and things like that? I think for the most part, you would reserve your judgment. And again, the fascination of the offseason has been the wide receivers and the offensive line. And there's actually meaningful things you can learn from the offensive line drills during the offseason. So I think that's why we've been so hyper-focused.
Name 3 NFL players that you think will have a breakout season in 2024. Brett, just going with Titans players. He says Will Levis, Tyjae Spears, and Ryan Stonehouse.
Well, no, Stonehouse is already in the...
He already broke out.
He's already in the Hall of Fame.
Well, yes, he is not a Hall of Famer, but yes, he has. What is it?
I should probably phrase that differently. Sorry.
The third-year punter is not a Hall of Famer,
he has articles of his clothing already at the Pro Football Hall of Fame for the record-setting rookie season that he had. Yes, I should clarify. Thank you.
Brian says Elijah Molden, Jalen Hyatt, and Cedric Gray.
Jalen Hyatt is an interesting one. Cleveland's New
York Giants.
Tillman is in Cleveland. Yeah, I'm not picking anybody on the Giants to break out. I'm good on that.
Their wide receiver core is
the weirdest.
Yeah, it is.
They're all the same player.
It is a collection of names, certainly. Which 104.5 The Zone personality would be the best wedding guest? Jamie says Slay. It was Slay's wedding in this case, but
Yes.
Slay probably is the answer.
You're sleeping on Dawn.
Sure, I absolutely
sleeping
am.
on Dawn. Everybody, every one of you, listen, it's not like you. Slay is not a wrong answer. I'm not going to crush you if you pick Slay. But if you go inherently with Slay without thinking about a single other person on the air here at the station, I think you are doing a incredible disservice to Dawn Davenport because she was awesome this weekend.
Gator Mike says it's Bert, no doubt. Karen says it's Robert Walsh. Steven says it is Dawn Davenport. Clay Phillips on Twitter says it is Dawn Davenport. Hashtag not a vol, he says. Patricia also says it is Dawn Davenport. Michael says hashtag summer programming. That's right, Michael.
It's the summer, and we're doing programming about a wedding that we all went to. Yes, you idiot.
It would be
That was harsh.
between Dawn, Slay, and Bert.
Between Dawn, Slay, and Bert. I think that's right. If you had to go with a wedding axis of evil, that would be it.
Or axis of fun.
No. Slay almost made me throw up before I got on my plane. Okay. Slay, my flight, Lucas, left at 3:30. Well, I left for the airport at 3:30 a.m. Pacific time. Okay. And do you know who greeted me in the lobby from his wedding, who was still awake and still kicking it at 3:30 a.m. in the lobby Pacific time?
Fantastic.
Ron Slay and Chris after their wedding. Congratulations to them. It was an awesome time.
Sad I missed it. Those are the polls.
And that's the show. We appreciate you guys hanging out with us. If you missed any of Charles Davis, if you missed any of Mike Wilson ahead of a incredible run by the Tennessee Vols that continues in the College World Series, you can check those visits out via the podcast. Check it out in your favorite podcast feed or rewatch the YouTube replay and subscribe to the channel while you're there. Prime time tonight. I'll see you then at 7 p.m.